Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's meeting. As you all know, it's my first formal board meeting, so thank you to everybody in advance for the various meetings I've had and various visits, etc. So I'll go straight into the agenda if that's okay. And the first item is just a couple of other introductions to say that we have a couple of guests joining us today who are presenting later on staff experience. So welcome to Indo Jacob, and also who's the ward manager, and also to Kelly Downs, Deputy Director of Nursing. They'll do a presentation on staff experience later. If we can just also welcome anybody who's watching online for today's meeting. And I also believe that Colette Kean, Deputy Director of Allied Health Professions, is also attending.
Yes. Morning, Andrew.
So nice to meet you. Thank you. I think I've covered the introductions for this morning. So if that's the case, I'll move on to apologies for absence. Item 1.2, there's about 2 apologies which have been noted, which is Peter Carr and also from Vivek Gold, the independent member. Okay, item 1.3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Is there anything that any members wish to declare or raise? No. Okay, on to the next item. This is the consent agenda business. So at this point, can I ask if there's anything in the agenda that members wish to bring forward from the consent agenda for individual discussion at this point? Members? Okay, in that case, then we'll move on to item 3, which is the experience story. This is the staff story about the first gold accredited ward. I'm pleased to welcome today Indo Jacob, who's the ward manager, and Kelly Downs, Deputy Director of Nursing, who will be presenting the staff story for the first gold accredited ward. So thank you.
You do it from here? Yeah. You okay then? Yeah, it's fine. So, thank you for inviting us along today. I'm Kelly Downs, Deputy Director of Nursing, and this is...
I'm Indo Jacob, the ward manager.
So we're going to just share our journey so far with the accreditation programme, and then we've got Indo's story with our first gold accreditation within the health board. So if you can just go to the next slide. So firstly, just to give a bit of context, what is accreditation? It's a structured evidence-based framework to improve quality, safety and consistency of care. There are different levels to progress through, starting with working towards, which is those teams and departments which are working towards their first level, which is bronze. And then once they've achieved their bronze level, they work then towards their silver and onwards to gold and eventually to platinum. The assessment process is underpinned by robust audits, and these audits are evidence-based. There's an independent review that takes place, and we also look at the quality indicators as well. So there's a real-time digital system that we use within the health board, which is AMET, and this provides real-time assurance then from ward to board. So the key message here is that we've got a transparent system that provides assurance, standardisation and measurable improvement. Next slide. So why do we implement accreditation? Well, firstly, it's to empower staff to deliver safe, high-quality, patient-centred care, to reduce unwarranted variation and to standardise clinical practice. Is to provide assurance to the board, regulators and public, and to enable shared learning, collaboration and professional development. So again, the key message here is that accreditation underpins quality, governance and organisational assurance. Next slide. So how does it support our values and patient experience? So it drives a culture of continuous improvement and professional standards, strengthens collective leadership, teamwork and pride amongst our teams. It aims to improve staff morale, retention and engagement. And most importantly, it embeds the patient's voice. And we do this through Civica and also USAID. We did feedback systems. We use the AMAT dashboard and our audits then to improve patient outcomes and experience. So the key message here is that accreditation translates organisational values into visible behaviours and improves patient experience. So just an overview of the programme so far. As of March this year, we've rolled out to 158 clinical teams across the health board, using a multi-phased approach across acute, community and specialist services. And as I said, we've got the digital dashboards and data that supports transparency, standardised reporting and benchmarking. And so far we've shared more than 40 quality improvement projects. There's wide stakeholder engagement across nursing and the wider MDT and also leadership teams. So again, the key message here that it's a large-scale system-wide transformation programme with very strong engagement. So we've got, in terms of our achievements and impact so far, as of March, 46 wards and departments and teams achieved bronze accreditation and 12 achieved silver accreditation. 5 areas are working towards gold this year. And we've got our first ward to achieve gold in April of this year, and that is D3 West at the Royal London Hospital. Got Indu here to share her experience around that. So accreditation is embedded in quality improvement, audit and assurance, and cross-organisational learning. And it's strengthened board assurance through data, public transparency and trust, staff engagement and capability. So the key message is that it's demonstrating tangible progress, measurable improvement and growing system maturity. So we've got a video to share now, and then Indu will share some of her personal experiences of the accreditation.
My name is Laura Bumpstead. I'm a senior nurse for Professional Standards and I lead the accreditation project for Aneurin Bevan Health Board. So I just want to tell you a little bit about what accreditation is. So it's a framework that we've implemented so that we can assess the quality of care that's delivered by our teams on our wards and wider than our wards through our clinics and theatres. The accreditation process measures our quality of care through different benchmarks like our infection control markers, our professional standards, and looking at patient feedback. It's really important that we listen to our patients to see how we can improve our standards of care. One of the other key components with our accreditation framework is looking at our quality improvement, so making sure that we're always improving our care and our standards on the ward. So each area has to submit a quality improvement project to pass their accreditation, so we're always sustaining improvement.
Standing here today is the proudest moment for all of us. During our ward accreditation inspection for the GORD, I was looking after a patient who was really unwell and was also worried and distressed. I heard from my senior nurse and manager that the team was really impressed about my patient care. Hearing those words about my practice was really overwhelming, which I'm never going to forget it. But this recognition is not only for me, this is for the entire team of D3 West, because we all make sure that we provide high quality of care to our patients.
I'm so pleased that we won the Gold Award as we do it, to make sure all the patients are happy and everything on it is good.
The ABHB accreditation process began in our ward in March 2024, and since then it has been fully embedded in our team. We have always believed that delivering high quality care, patient safety, ensuring safety standards are in our heart in what we do. This accreditation process, it is formally assessed and validated these values. We achieved bronze accreditation in September 2024, followed by silver in July 2025. Now we are at gold. What makes this especially noticeable is these achievements and improvements we continued even when we changed our ward. It wasn't that really easy. Accreditation process is time consuming, but what it really did is created a culture of improvement. At every stage we focused on to meet and maintaining the standard, and that focus really led the change.
During our golden stage, we worked closely with the infection prevention and management team, delivered structured training over 4 weeks, gathered feedback and responded to the challenges by providing additional support to the staff where needed. The second initiative was the introduction of patient safety stickers to the drug charts. Simple visual prompts like our stickers have made a real differences.
Being part of D3 West, I've seen it grow into a comforting place for patients, staff and relatives too.
What makes D3 West so special is the patients. It sounds cheesy, but it's true because we get people from all walks of life. Some come for a few hours, some stay for a few days, and some stay for weeks. Most of them will be going through really challenging and traumatic times in their lives. So knowing that this golden accreditation can give them a little bit of reassurance and we can make a space that is just a little bit better for them is really, really nice for us.
This journey has been about more than accreditation. It's been about building a culture where quality, safety and continuous improvement are part of everyday practice.
The patients cheered in the bay and stated that they deserved it because they gave amazing care. And above all, that's the most important award of all, is to know we have done our best for our patients, and that's what they do every day.
We have seen tangible improvements in quality measures like falls, healthcare acquired pressure ulcers, healthcare acquired infections, medication error. For example, at bronze level, we have 12 recorded medication errors, and at this level we had none in last 6 months. Our engagement with the research team also embedded evidence-based practice in our care. Even we nominated research champion as D3 West.
So I want to also take this opportunity to thank my ward manager, Mrs. Indu Jacob, and our senior nurse, Avril Linstone, for giving all the support and guidance whenever we needed.
Achieving the accreditation status couldn't be possible, well, firstly without the patients, but also with our staff. And I know Indu wouldn't like me to give her a shout out, but I have to. And I think that due to her compassionate care and amazing leadership skills, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So it's a really big achievement for us, for the patients and for Indu.
And Iron Bevan are currently rolling out the accreditation process through a lot of our different clinical areas. Some areas have just started this process, and we really want to be able to recognise the good practice through their journey from bronze all the way through to platinum accreditation.
Accreditation is really important because it gives us confidence and the patient's confidence. It's not just about passing an assessment, but it is about making sure good practice is embedded and sustained across our teams. I also want to take a moment to say how proud I am of D3 West. They are the first area to achieve gold. It's a fantastic achievement and real testament to the hard work, commitment and the teamwork of the whole ward. Most importantly, accreditation has made a real difference to the patient experience. It's helped improve communication, strengthen care processes and make sure that patients feel informed, supported and safe. Patients benefit from more consistent care, clearer information and smoother journeys, which in all helps build trust and confidence. Accreditation isn't a one-off achievement, it's about creating the right culture. One where staff feel valued and supported. Standards are clear and patients can feel confident that they are receiving high quality care every time.
Okay, thank you very much. To say that it's really good to see the care and commitment from staff, but also the passion. I have to say from the visits over the last couple of weeks I've done, I've been really impressed with meeting staff about the real commitment they have to the health board and providing the very best care for patients. It's been really good to see. We'll come back inside.
Do you mind if Indo carries on with
Yeah,
the
yeah, sure.
presentation?
So the slide is the next slide is about patient experience and staff experience after the accreditation. So for the patient experience, it is like a reassurance. For example, when this ward accreditation certificate I displayed on the entrance. So as patient and family, then it is a reassurance. They get the confidence to come, and then for the patient staff, then it empowered them to initiate the initiative with the multidisciplinary team, a collaborative work, and they also confidence to make communications. The edit couple of quality improvement projects we done is edit, and then healthcare acquired infections to reduce the number. So which you can see the following slides, you can see the reduction in the number of healthcare acquired infections and the improvement we made for the communication. So these are staff experience and patient experience. Next slide, please. So as I said, we collected the data from March 2023 to April 2026, and you can see the different aspects of the care like falls, medication error, pressure ulcer. The number you can see is high, and it reduced to significant reduction, and it is sustained over the time through the accreditation journey. And as we said on the slide, at golden accreditation time, then our medication error and all became 0. So it is a massive achievement. Next slide, please. This is staff sickness levels. So you can see there is a reduction in staff sickness rate as well, because it's, through this ward accreditation, that it impacted the ward environment, made a positive work place. So it affected staff sickness as well, and you can see there is a reduction in staff sickness level as well. Next slide, please.
Well, please.
Well, firstly, thank you so much, Indu. Thank you so much for coming over. I had the pleasure of seeing all these things that you presented. I was at a patient safety visit with SEMA a couple of weeks ago. So really very impressive the way you've done. I met the staff, I met the patients. So I just wanted to endorse the wonderful work. My question to the team at that time also was that we should know more about this achievement. It's a wonderful achievement. I mean, the sickness level going down, the commitment and everything is so positive. The question really I have is that what can we do to roll out all this program to the different wards, to the different divisions? I mean, maybe systematically. And I've seen the way you have explained, right from bronze to gold, that's the journey. That is impressive. So I think I would really like to congratulate you again, your team, your staff, and equally for us, I think it is how to roll this out to the other divisions as well. So I don't know how we can do that.
So we have a very detailed project plan Atmel. So we have a programme of work which we have shared previously at PQSO, just in terms of how we take forward the programme. So we started with a pilot, obviously a couple of years ago, and we've continued to roll out to all clinical areas. So our ambition will be that in the next couple of years, we will have accreditation in every single environment. We need to be clear, this isn't just about wards. We have teams, operating theatres, outpatient departments. We have continuing care coming online. And some of this has to be led by the team, so they have to be ready. So Laura provides a lot of support in, but the leadership is key as well. And we have to stress, this is multi-professional. Whilst nursing has led it from a project perspective, this is not just about nursing. This is about all our staff inputting. You'll have seen the domestic who's really involved in accreditation on D3 West. We've got medical staff involved, our allied health professionals, colleagues involved. So this is truly multi-professional. It's truly led from the ground up, but we do have a project plan I'd be very happy to share with the board that takes us forward into the future to ensure that all areas are accredited. And I have promised the first area to platinum, I will buy them cakes.
I'll join you.
Thank you. Ian?
Congratulations. I mean, it's absolutely a fantastic story, and I'm a big believer in the value of continuous improvement. And it's great to see it being adopted in this way and spreading. The thing I wasn't expecting on this presentation was the very final slide with the impact on sickness. And I mean, that was amazing to me. And I wonder whether there are any learnings that you can share about what underlies that amazing performance in terms of sickness.
The sickness, when we look at the sickness rate, then the top priority comes like anxiety and stress, work related. So if I work in a positive, compassionate, supportive environment, definitely it will affect my mental well-being. And so I will be happy to come rather than it will be like a work burden like. So I'm sure, hand on my chest, if you work in a positive environment, then definitely affect the staff sickness.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you.
Penny, next, please.
Yes, I just want to say that it makes me incredibly proud. So I'm sure you must be, as an ex-nurse, to see that standard so high again. It's incredible, and you've worked so hard. And I love the way the whole team is involved, everybody, which I think is incredibly important. But my question is this rolled out? Is this just in ABUHB, or is it rolled out throughout Wales or UK?
So there are currently different accreditation programs. It's not a national program. So CTM and Cardiff and Vale have rolled out accreditation. We've gone further. So I think if you look at the rollout of the program, we've certainly gone further in terms of numbers of areas, and 158 is amazing in terms of the number of clinical areas that are engaged currently, and that will increase obviously as we continue to roll out the programme. But there is a piece of work ongoing nationally looking at whether Wales should have a national accreditation process and tool, and that's being led by the Chief Nursing Officer for Wales. We've inputted quite heavily to that piece of work. Sure. So they've been looking at the work we've done in Aaron Bevan to see, what elements can be rolled out. And we've had assurance that whatever national programme comes, it will build on the work we've done rather than us having to restart the programme again.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Will, next, please.
Fantastic, and Andrew and I came to ward I think a week or two ago, and it was amazing to kind of walk in and see the notice where you're proudly saying you've got it. So well done. Mine's more a question of ignorance rather than anything else. What is the criteria, or how do you get awarded bronze? Is it based on performance around quality and safety, or is it a mix of different measures? And then following on, because we all like to be a bit challenging, don't we? I mean, you're in pole position now to be the first platinum ward in the organisation. What is it you need to do to move from what already seems like really, really impressive performance to get to platinum.
So we need to sustain the high standard what we are delivering now.
Okay.
So sustain that, keep on support the staff, keep on, continue the training session, identify early the weak areas and escalate it and rectify it early. So I'm sure me and her team is looking forward to get the platinum first.
Right. So I answer your first question. So there is a set of metrics for each ward and team. We do adapt those so that it fits with the team and that it's relevant. So that those metrics will be your professional standards, so your uniform compliance, your adherence to the values and behaviours. And then we've got our quality metrics, so looking at, making sure that we can see a reduction in falls, medication errors and so on. A quality improvement initiative that the ward has developed, which is in line with some of their learning around, their quality indicators, documentation audits. So everything that you would expect to be done well in a ward or a team, that's exactly what we're measuring. We do keep that under regular review, and we try and make sure, we do make sure that it's evidence-based and that we're adapting and we're learning, and if audits aren't quite right, then we adapt them to make sure that they're fit for purpose. And I think this is where the work comes in with from an all Wales basis, is around making sure that we're just not measuring ourselves, we're benchmarking as well with our peers across Wales and the UK.
I'll bring in Nicola next, please.
Yeah, so some of the points have been picked up, but fantastic. And as Will said, we walked on the ward and you could see all the gold stars against everyone's name, which really was fantastic to see. And you can see the pride in all the teams, whatever level of accreditation they achieve, they all feel a real sense of pride that they've done together. So I think it's a fantastic programme. I think it's answering Akmal's point as well, which Jen speaked into Penny's question, was there's 160 areas that are in the process. So I know Kelly mentioned 46 have got the bronze, but there's 160 and growing number of wards teams that are in the process. So I think that point about us trying to roll it out everywhere, there's a huge amount of work going on, people trying to get to that bronze level as a first step. And then I think the second point, and we've had this discussion as an executive team, is it's all very quality and safety driven, which is right. So we've been talking about then what are the workforce metrics that then sit alongside us. So it's not embedded in the accreditation. So seeing that sickness data, and then things like where we are with PADRs, training, so bringing the workforce metrics alongside now the ward accreditation will help give us that greater insight into the impact it's having. So it's very much kind of on our radar to do that evaluation. So thank you. Very excellent. Well done.
Paul, and then
Yeah, I would make the same point as Penny about kind of national context. So I'm just going to say it may be quite useful to map out something like you've got 158 clinical areas. What would that? How many are there in totality in terms of the numbers? 158 out of about how many would it be?
I don't know. They have to get that detail.
It's quite useful to know that.
There's a lot.
And then exactly, I was wondering what percentage it was of it all, because I mean it's incredibly powerful stuff, and it's great to hear and shine the light on staff voice, because that's something which I think is important. How long is the accreditation for, and how would that be re-accredited?
So they proceed through bronze, silver, gold, platinum,
right?
And they have to maintain the standards. So if you drop back, you will drop back in your accreditation. So there is a real impetus for the teams to keep the standards high.
Yeah.
But there's such pride, I think, in their accreditation status that we haven't seen. I think we've seen one area drop back, and that's all. Yeah. So it really does drive that quality improvement, that culture, those values and behaviours, because people want to be, they want to be gold. Indu's really ambitious about being platinum, and that means you have to maintain your high standards.
And if there was something that the board could do to help to move this forward even further, I think it's been mentioned, what would that be?
I think your encouragement when you visit, and your encouragement and praise for staff for what they've achieved, because it is tough. This process isn't easy. And, you know, we will often assess areas and ask them to do further work. It's not a tick box at all. It's a really, really tough process, but it's one people have really got behind. And I think one of the interesting things has been the real drive around quality improvement. So the quality improvement projects, I think, are implicit to really driving forward those standards. So we ask teams to maintain, and we will continuously assess that.
Well done. Thank you.
Okay.
Just to add as well, that where we're seeing the areas that are really progressing, that's great. But where we're seeing areas that are not, then we are looking to understand why they're not and what support they need. And we're looking at the themes and trends as to why they're not progressing, because I think then that's something as a system we need to, look at. So I think this accreditation process provides us with really valuable intelligence to tell us exactly what we need to focus on as an organisation to drive up standards.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think I challenged Jenny quite a bit when this came in.
You did?
I did. And I've never been convinced on these kind of systems, to be honest. I've seen them come into my world, the banking world, in various guises of people trying to, and it's just doing the job. But I think this one has actually made quite an impact. I mean, my mind has been changed around this one. So I know there's a cost to it, yeah. But I know there's a cost to it, obviously, in time and everything, in getting the accreditation, etc., etc. But some of the stats that come up have changed my mind a little. But yeah, I'm back with Paul of, how many areas are, various other areas are out there. Is there a resistance then to step up to this level, or is there a resource implication that we can't get out to more, or what is it that's stopping us getting more people up to this kind of, it's fantastic what you've done and everything else is great. And like Neil, I mean, seeing those absence rates come plummeting down, and that is a massive cost to us in this organisation, tells me that this needs a bit more resource and costs going into it to actually push this forward a bit. As I say, I wasn't somebody who was convinced by this from the start, but it appears to be pushing us in the right direction in terms of some big costs that we have in the organisation.
Can I just pick up on that? I think that's a really good point in terms of going forward about future evaluation, to understand in terms of both staff morale, performance, but also the sickness levels, is that maintained throughout the accreditation period? And then perhaps maybe having some data in the future around post and pre accreditation, because as you say, it does come at a cost, but actually it could be a real investigative initiative, but also in terms of the outcomes for patients, in terms of the quality, obviously happy staff, hopefully, do better, do well, and feel as though they're part of the team, and therefore maybe, that does have a longer term impact on sickness. So I think some further evaluation in due course would be really helpful.
If I may, Chair, yes, we're planning a formal evaluation, and we were hoping to lean into your values team, just to try and, because I think there's a value proposition here for this process. So we want to make sure that we're evidence-based around the impacts, and we know that harm costs, and where we have high quality care, that drives productivity and outcomes. So we're going to do a formal evaluation, but we really want to lean into values-based healthcare around what is the value proposition with this process.
The hands raised on this. So again, thank you both, Indra and Kelly, for presenting this morning, and well done. People convey that back to your staff and your teams. So I think everybody's been very positive about this today. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One of the next agenda item, which is the Chair and Chief Exec's update. Bit of item when we get close to weeks, update, but I would just like to start off by saying thank you to Phil, who will be the interim chair during the transition period, and also for the support he's provided to both myself and the Vice Chair in various briefings and meetings. Also, in terms of the general induction, I have to say a big thank you to both Nicola and Rani for the support they provided, and especially on the amount of visits that's been organised as part of the induction. Myself and Will have visited a number of hospitals. I've lost track over the last few weeks, and even before we came in, some site visits. We did go to the Grange to have a look at the emergency department. We had a good tour for the whole afternoon into the evening of that venue, so it's been really helpful to get a full understanding and to meet as many staff as possible, and to actually use some of the issues on the ground has been quite helpful. In terms of my objectives that have been set by the Cabinet Secretary as the Chair, these will now be put down to the Chief Executive and appropriate board members going forward. Included in there, of course, is the de-escalation from level 4 of finance and urgent and emergency care. That's a real focus on us going forward. And I know we've discussed and we'll be setting up standalone finance performance committee meetings to really focus on that, to give it the time and the scrutiny that's needed going forward during the period of escalation. In terms of the a bit of an overview, we've seen now the new minister has been appointed. Already there's plans underway in terms of the chairs through the Confederation meeting with the new Cabinet Secretary. There's already been, I think, I don't know if you didn't meet in the end yesterday with the Cabinet Secretary, but I know Chief Execs yesterday were intending to have a meeting with him. There's 2 deputy ministers as well covering health. So we have a Deputy Minister Health and Care, and then there's a Deputy Minister which covers the public and preventative health, which I think is quite welcomed in terms of some of the areas we previously discussed around the longer term preventative health strategy, and that links in then with highlighted here the better health, better care, better lives, so 2035 strategy. There is 18 Senate members now covering the Gwent region. I know I've discussed with the Chief Executive about having good engagement with those members cross-party to ensure that they're all as brief as possible, but also that they see the good things that are going on in the health board, and also those areas which are having extra oversight and challenge and scrutiny. I think it's important as much as possible we keep them informed of the work that's being done by members. There's also meetings being set up. I've raised this previously between myself and Nicola with leaders and chief executives of the 5 local authorities. So initially we're looking to meet with the chief exec and the leaders individually, hopefully on a monthly or bi-monthly process. We're going forward, we hope to have a meeting so that they're being scheduled, and in particular the focus on some of those early meetings with local authorities will be around the frailty care and obviously with the changes planned over the next 12 months. How that does interface with health board. So that is a real focus. I know that previously members of the board have expressed concern to understand what is going to be replacing what is currently in place. In terms of other engagements I've met with the chairs a couple of weeks ago, just before I come into post. I met with all the chairs of health boards across Wales. I've had a meeting with the GMC, and I plan to attend tomorrow the digital conference in Cardiff. So it's been a busy couple of weeks, but again, I'd like to just reiterate with thanks to everybody for all the one-to-one meetings we've had, for introductories, but also in terms of the staff and all the visits we've done, because it's helped to really build a picture. Particularly, I'd like to thank as well Will coming into post. It's been really good in terms of working with Will so far, and also trying to get a full understanding about some of those key areas, but trying to get the balance right between what the health board is really doing well. We need to probably raise more in the profile, and also those areas that do need to be really scrutinised in terms of getting further assurance and further challenge into the system. That's all for myself. I'll pass over to Nicola, please, for the Chief Exec's update.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, it's really good to welcome you in the new chair, and Will as the vice chair. It's been a great opportunity. I've been going around having the opportunity to visit many of the sites, and not just in terms of giving you that oversight, but also having that chance to share some of the opportunities and the challenges that we face. And I think, great to see the staff engaging and the positivity that we're surrounded by every day out in the teams, which I know you've both been hugely impressed with. So I'm really looking forward to the experiences you bring and the kind of fresh insight and perspective to the board and the organisation. And like Andrew, really thank Phil as well for holding the fort over the last few months and the support Phil has offered us. So since the last meeting in March, we obviously closed down the year end. I'm pleased to say that we delivered our year end financial forecast. It wasn't the break even that we set up at the beginning of the year with a plan, but we've been able to deliver against a very challenging forecast position to the year end. We've seen significant reductions in our waiting lists. You know, this was a political priority, and we've seen a reduction of around 30,000 people have come off our total waiting list, which is brilliant. And our 104-week patients waiting more than 2 years has reduced down to almost zero. The challenges we had around bone cement in the last few months meant we were around 23 short. 23 patients unfortunately still waiting 2 years, but will be our priority now going into the new year. Diagnostic weights were at the lowest for some time, and some of this will be picked up in the performance report. And again, cancer performance in March and urgent emergency care during the winter, whilst it's been hugely challenging, has seen quite significant improvements from the previous winter, and we need to continue to build on that now as we go into the new year. So a very challenging year, and we've been doing a lot of work with the divisions now where we do year-end reviews, and it's a really good opportunity to look back at the challenges we faced, the achievements we've made, and the priorities now going into the new year. But we're 2 months into the new year pretty much already, and we submitted the annual plan at the last board meeting, and we've now had a formal response from Welsh Government around the plan, and we've got further work that we're undertaking around particularly the financial challenges we face in the 2-year waits and obviously urgent emergency care as our kind of main areas of focus. It was good to welcome NHS Performance and Improvement came for a visit last week to meet with some of the teams, and they did a visit around the Grange as well, and they're working really collaboratively with us on our urgent emergency care plans, and we've got a refreshed plan on the agenda today. And Handover 45, which is trying to get to a point where no patient waits more than 45 minutes on an ambulance. That national programme is continuing to progress, and our health board, along with other health boards, are meeting with WAST and NHS P&I colleagues around the transition plan to make a further step change in this particular initiative. On the agenda under the noting is the new accountability framework that's been agreed, that's now in place by Welsh Government, and we've got our first new format of escalation meetings in early June, which we are busy preparing for. Again, we'll focus on our areas of escalation in particular, and kind of welcome the additional committee that's been put in frequency of the committee that's been put in place around those two areas. As the chair mentioned, a number of chief exec sessions have been held. So as always, chief executives, we've come together and really focused on where our priorities are in terms of where we need to work collectively. And I know we've really welcomed the government's enhanced focus on public health and prevention. And our place-based care work is progressing really well, and we'll be bringing a detailed update on that programme to a future board meeting. Just in terms of finishing off, we've had, there's a really successful allied health profession and health sciences conference last week that led. It really was a fantastic event focused on values, passions and strengths, and a really powerful approach for staff to talk about their own values and experiences and how that's driving their service improvement. So that was great to be part of that. And I also held one of the, quarterly Patient Choice Awards in the last month, which really is one of the most rewarding sessions in my that I hold, where we get some really powerful stories from patients and families in terms of how individual staff members or teams have really made an impact on their experience or their family's experience. So great to be part of that. And on the awards theme, we've had over 700 nominations from staff for the staff awards. I think it's the record number, and we are currently working through a very challenging shortlisting process because you could absolutely shortlist them all. So we will be working through that in advance of the staff awards at the end of July. So I'll pause at that point, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Unless there's any burning questions, I'm happy just to note the update from myself, then Chief Exec will move on to the agenda item 5, which is the performance delivery. This is urgent emergency care improvement and stabilisation plan. Yeah, please present this. Sorry, Akmal, you don't come in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you as well. I just wanted to have a bit of maybe an assurance or clarification on your bringing down the waiting times, and especially the progress that we have made. I was just wondering, how are we communicating to the wider community or especially, you know, with the Welsh government and everyone, how can we really say to them that things are really happening? Because there's been, since December, we have been talking about all the, you know, conditions that we are all facing. So it's a good story to be able to communicate. And I was just wondering whether we are doing it, or is there a platform, or is there a strategy that we can push that things are happening in a positive way?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point, and we obviously will draw some of these out to a normal annual report process. But it's whether we may choose to be a more targeted report that we can share more publicly. But yeah, I think it's a valid point to raise the profile. I know there's work being done nationally around the progress that has been made on the overall waiting lists. I was in a meeting yesterday where, when you look at the scale of reduction across Wales on a number of the kind of metrics on waiting lists, it is, you know, there was a significant investment put into this, and it's been a huge effort for staff. We've been treating about an additional 1,000 outpatients a week for the last 6 months to try to have this impact. So maybe a summary report of, you know, where we started from and where we ended the year. I think our challenge going forward now is about our ability to sustain those significant investment to get the backlog. Is how do we sustain some of those positions, which we know is challenging for a number of our specialties, and that's the work that we will be concentrating on now. But it's important not to lose that reduction in the overall waiting list, which was pretty significant.
No, well,
Yeah, I'll think about how we can perhaps do more proactive communications around that.
I think. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jan, please.
And so from planned care to urgent and emergency care. Thank you, Chair. So today I'm presenting our urgent emergency care improvement and stabilisation plan, in particular for 26-27, which sets out really how we are going to respond as a system to significant and pretty sustained pressure in what is an intractable issue, I think, across the whole of the country. The board will be very well aware that urgent emergency care remains one of our key priorities. Also heightened, I guess, or sort of flagged as a result of the increase to level 4 targeted intervention in December of 25. We do have ongoing pressures in relation to sort of continued high demand, which I'll touch on very briefly, but not in a great deal of detail for today, at least. Some issues with spikes of increase in patient acuity, particularly sort of attendances in relation to our frail and older sort of population. I think it's fair to say that we are relentless in our pursuit for improvement. No one accepts in the system that we are working in that what is happening in the system and the performance that we've been able to deliver, and most importantly, the outcomes that we achieve is good enough. And all of the staff involved in this, I think, want to do better and are committed to that. I think it's how we organise ourselves to deliver that. We have made progress. I think we were absolutely gutted to be placed into targeted intervention because of the progress that we had made, accepting that it's not fast enough, but it is, at least it has been sort of sustained, and lots of the changes that we are trying to make embed sort of permanent improvement in terms of the outcomes for this. So in terms of the purpose of the plan, threefold really: improve whole system flow, reduce delays and harm, and deliver that sustainable improvement in patient experience and outcomes. When we've talked to you as a board previously, we have talked about sometimes we've had to trade off on safety and against sort of patient experience, and that is definitely some of the impact of the changes that we've made so far. We have brought this plan together as one cohesive plan from a change to the 6 goals framework that previously existed in terms of UEC, the work that we had ongoing on our next patient, and some of the national priorities. And there's been a rethink nationally away from 6 goals into 3 pillars of urgent emergency care. There was a national summit not so long ago on urgent emergency care. It was a really good opportunity to see some exemplar areas of work, I think, to give us food for thought around the work that we have put forward. and also give us time to reflect on the plan, which was already pretty well sort of established, I think, from our perspective. So 5 key work streams, Our Next Patient, which really focuses on the operational day-to-day grip and control that permeates down into divisions and directorates and particular teams driving forward operational sort of areas of improvement. That is always evidence-based and data-driven. We assess, Matt is relentless in his pursuit of sort of the data to underpin delivery and audit, I think, to check, balance that what we're doing is the right thing and is not having unintended consequences or will deliver what we expect. But the reality is there's no silver bullet for urgent emergency care. It's lots of incremental improvements to deliver that whole system flow, the holy grail that we seek. Integrated discharge is the next area. Jen has previously led sort of a very significant programme of work, but we know, and it's one of the main pillars that has come out nationally around the ward discharge and that area. So really, that is the area that we are focusing our engagement with our local authority partners. Really, really key. We've seen some key movements, I think, fair to say, on our MOU on sort of trusted assessor and also restart of packages. So again, sort of the space where we're working in partnership. And then in terms of transformation, older person pathway, which we've briefed the board on previously, and that really will be how we will change our system on a more sustainable sort of medium-term basis, and the acute medical model, which we struggled with certainly since we've opened the Grange, alongside stroke improvement as a particular area of focus for urgent emergency care. So those 5 areas with an agreed delivery approach and pretty tight overarching governance will allow us to deliver on the plans that we say that we have to the trajectories that we are committing to. 3, again, sort of main areas of delivery, that strengthening of the operational grip and oversight, improving ambulance handovers. I'll come back to that in a moment because the plan was written and a letter has landed, so I do need to reference that, and that acceleration of flow and the discharge improvements that we've talked about, and again sort of we'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. The paper sets out the governance, the programme structure, and Nicola will chair a board that will meet on a monthly basis, but there are more frequent meetings that happen sort of around that drive for improvement that is expected sort of much more rapidly than we might in sort of other areas of work. And obviously the change to the Finance and Performance Committee structure, particularly in sight of the escalation, will outline, I guess, sort of the delivery expectations from an organisational perspective that I can convey then into the teams. They are all underpinned by trajectories, milestone plans, which are set out in part in the paper, but sort of not wanting to give you sort of war and peace, but they are there for assurance, and we'll be able to drill into more detail in those finance and performance sort of committees. 3 things I just wanted to mention that I tease out really, I think sort of that is that a letter has come in relation to handover 45. So our de-escalation criteria has our target as 1 hour handover numbers. That will need to change to handover 45 in line with the national sort of direction. We set out a trajectory to the end of March in line with our IMTP. Again, there is an expectation from that letter, but we're still waiting on confirmation of the detail on this, that we are delivering handover 45 by the autumn. So there will need to be some rework of the trajectory. So I'm just flagging that to board that even though this is the plan as it sits at the moment, adjustments will need to be made to that when we work through the details. And in fact, there was a meeting with WASP colleagues this morning talking about how we start to progress sort of towards that. I'm sure that will feature in our escalation meeting sort of in early June, but I think just to flag that, that's pretty important. Second, as though it's not hard enough, is that we are entering a period of building works in our emergency department over the summer as well. So some of the operational risk that we would normally carry is likely to be sort of exacerbated by those building works. Clearly, we will do what we can to compress the building works and mitigate the impact on our patients in the first instance, and then the teams working in that environment. But that is a really important development. The board will be aware we took a decision to open the waiting room early before Christmas last year, even though we knew that not all of the building works had been completed. We didn't feel that we could cope with another winter with the existing waiting room as it was sort of last year. So we took a deliberate decision to pause the building works. The internal reconfiguration is really important in terms of assessment space and that weight target that is set out in the plan, and also giving us additional triage space for ambulances as well. We've only got one space for ambulance triage as it currently sits. So really important around sort of sustainability, and we're just waiting on, I think, some procurement information, I think, to triangulate that. And then the final, I guess, sort of fly in the ointment is that we've been asked to pilot WECDS, which is Welsh Emergency Care Department standards, data standards, as one of the only health boards in Wales to do that. So it may well mean that we'll move away from our traditional metrics into different metrics going forward. So appreciate I've probably painted a picture that sounds as though we're in fog, but I think the UEC plan for us will give absolute sort of that North Star, our guide of the things that we need to focus on, why we need to focus on it, and why it's important, really. So I'll pause there, just a bit of a summary. I'm sure Nicola will want to add to that as well, given the importance of this, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Just before I bring Nicola, can I just say that ahead of the performance meeting at Dulce, which is specifically on the level 4 intervention, I'd like to meet with you and Nicola around how we put together some data as a dashboard, a simple dashboard, which not only can come to that committee, but can go on a monthly basis to all members. In particular, as you said, there's lots of different pillars to the interventions, but I'd be keen that we are following up as that path develops and the further interventions come online, to see are those interventions that we think are making a difference, are they actually making a difference? And we can track it month by month. But I would like to have a simple format that we can clearly see are the interventions, and previously there's been interventions which obviously has given extra capacity, but still hasn't led to the overall picture improving. So I think having something we could fully track month by month, share with all the board, I think that's something I'd like to do. But if I could meet with yourself and Nicola could develop that ahead of the meeting.
Very much welcome, thank you.
Nicola first.
Yeah, and just following up that, so we held the new format of the UEC programme board, we were kind of finalising membership as well on Monday. So, and part of the discussion we had there was, what does that standard data set look like that we would then report up to the Finance and Performance Committee? So agreeing that with yourselves, I think, will be helpful. We've got quite a lot of data, and it's about picking which are the important ones that will feed into there that reflect on the actions we're taking. So very much welcome that, and is consistent with the discussion we had on Monday. So again, I think just reiterating, lots of these programmes of work are already happening. We're trying to pull them together under much more robust kind of centralised structure, and be really clear around each quarter what are the milestones, of the actions that we're taking, are we on track or not, and then what impact is it having on the data. So try to be really focused and supporting the teams on the various work that's underway. So I think I want to add, I think give a good coverage of where we're at, really.
Thank you. Good report.
Yeah, I just wanted to say well done to Leanne for putting all this together. You mentioned the word milestone, so I'm going to mention the word millstone. What are the barriers do you think we're going to come across, and what can we as a board do to help you to get this resolved?
I mean, we've seen an excellent example this morning of what culture does in performance for our patients, and I think this, and in fact, there was an article I was reading, I'll circulate sort of to the execs a little bit later, around Watford. Watford was one of the worst in the country for corridor waits, and UEC, and they've turned it around, through cultural shift. So I think the maintenance, the relentless focus on that culture of patient safety first, and we are going to deliver improvement in this area, I think is really important. That will require collective effort from all of the execs, sort of clinically, particularly sort of to reinforce, I guess, those professional standards that we're expecting. So I think that is the one thing in particular. I think if independent members are out and about or reaching into different parts of the system via patient safety visits, would welcome you testing that, I think, on behalf of the board to give assurance. But culture is how we will deliver this longer term, whilst we work through some of the transactional changes and then the wider longer term transformation programs. And I'm going to say digital, which Paul was, which he knows and is supporting us on, brilliant. But this is a very complex and diverse system that we're looking at. So the digital thing is not an easy fix, I accept that.
Credits the members, so go to Penny next, please.
Sorry, my computer's just gone. I've got two questions really, but one is regarding the acute medical model. It wants to, it will require us to strengthen workforce sustainability. And I was just wondering, is this realistic? How do we achieve this? Because it is important if we're going to be successful. And the second question really was the local authority representative on the programme board. I wondered how that worked. Was it one member for each, or director from each authority, or is it one for all of the authorities, and how's that decided?
Yeah, we discussed that on Monday and agreed that we would ask one director of social services to sit there representing the 5. So that we in the process of requesting that from them now, following the Monday meeting. That's what we decided was probably the best approach. Yes. Thanks.
On that point, Penny, actually, just to say, I've been discussing as well about we do need to get a director of social services on the board here. And as again, part of the conversation, we're going to be following up with 5 local authorities, having a director to be able to attend these board meetings and to have that engagement and understanding, and then sharing it with the 5 local authorities is key going forward. Yeah. So that is something we're looking to implement.
Just sorry, should I just respond on the acute medical model? Sorry. Is it realistic? Yes, it's been very difficult to achieve though, Penny. I think we've got our teams spread. The analogy of jam, you spread jam into a thin lead of cleanse jam. Yeah. We must support what is probably one of our most fragile teams, I think, sort of to reconfigure, I think, so that they will deliver better outcomes for our patients. There's a view from the clinical director that they feel they can serve patients, improving discharges by potentially up to 20%. I think that's yet to be proven. If we can support them to come together in a different way, that will require a different way of working, same-day emergency care rather than admission focus. And it goes hand in hand with the older person's pathway work as well. We know a lot of patients are accessing the wrong part of the system for the wrong need. So by placing the patient or navigating the patients to where their care needs are best met, I think we will be able to reconfigure it. But those 2 areas of work will definitely be how we deliver sustainability in this area and significant improvement.
It's key. Yes, thank you.
Okay, David is next, please.
No, that question be answered.
Okay, thank you. Will next, please.
Thanks, and thanks, Leanne, for the work. It's really impressive. I've got a couple of questions, if it's okay. One is, this is a huge project that's going to touch just about every part of the organisation. Having been involved in projects quite a lot, not everything happens in the way that you expected. So some things will be more important than others in terms of the project plan. Are we clear about what those critical activities are, and we know when we get problems with resources what we absolutely need to focus on? That is kind of question 1. Question 2 is more towards CIMA. So the document itself talks about clinical engagement, clinical involvement in the programme, but in the overall document I didn't get a real sense of clinical leadership driving the change, because again, the clinical workforce in taking the decisions through the flow are going to be fundamental to the success and embedding of the process. So how is clinical leadership embedded in the programme, and are we confident that we've got sufficient highly visible clinical leaders actually driving this forward into the workforce?
Did you want me to take that one first? Yeah, so absolutely, well, we do need that clinical leadership as the foundation of this work, and that doesn't just mean medical, that is all of our clinical workforce. And I've been really impressed, particularly with the older people's pathway work and the acute medicine model, with the engagement we have had from different professional groups who have come together to look at what the clinical operational standards are. We've got good evidence of what works, and we've got great examples of what's working elsewhere and within AB as well, and then applying that to what we're finding in our current situation. So that leadership is there. To further enhance that, we've got those transformational programs. We are reviewing a group that can come together, a clinical expert group, a clinical reference group that can look at the challenges that we're coming up against when we're working through the plan and provide that advisory and supportive work that can happen actually on the ground as well as feeding into the board. So I think that we have got great engagement, we could do more, and this is a journey, so we're going to have to keep continuing with that. And of course we've got our clinical executives who are also involved with this alongside Leanne.
Okay, and bring Nicola in and bring Leanne back.
I just wanted to add to that because we've had a lot of discussion about the leadership against each of the programmes, haven't we, in terms of whether we should spread out the kind of key lead for each of the sub-programmes. But I think our general reflection is, you know, operationally this sits with Leanne as the Chief Operating Officer, but each of the programmes is having a strong clinical executive who's attached to each of the programmes, that in addition to what happens throughout the organisation. But I absolutely see this as a collaborative effort between all of the executives, but particularly where clinical leadership supports each of those programmes. So we've had quite detailed debates about that to make sure clinical leadership is at the forefront alongside Leanne as the Chief Operating Officer. And as Seema said, that is absolutely the approach we take it.
And don't come back in.
Probably not on that. I think the clinical leadership has been covered. I mean, obviously that's supplemented by our divisions are structured by divisional director, divisional nurse, and where appropriate sort of therapist as well. So there's an expectation of that. You haven't got an empty Chief Operating Officer sort of pulling the strings on this. I think there is, I coordinate it, I sort of plan to sort of deliver it and help drive it forward, but it is all completely clinically led, and I think sort of seems absolutely right. The quality of clinical debate that we've been having and challenge as well, I think fair to say, team has been excellent in challenging some of our norms to get us to the point on the older person's pathway. Back to your initial question, Will, I think you just prompted I guess sort of a thought for me, because absolutely, we can't have a 100-point plan for this because it is so sprawling and complex, as you rightly say. I have that probably in my head, if I'm really honest. So I know that SPOA and deconditioning are the things for us that we've got to drive forward to get the discharge numbers, to allow the flow to happen and improve outcomes, most importantly for our patients. And SPOA will be how we will get patients to the right place. What I'll give some thought to is how we almost risk rate those milestones so that that's more transparent for people and everyone can see if we're focusing our effort. So I think it's a good challenge. We absolutely are tracking the things that we think are most important. But I think we can do that more transparently via the programme. So thank you for the suggestion, for the nudge.
You went next, please.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the culture thing that you brought up earlier. I happened to be up at the Grange, so it's a bit of anecdotal stuff. I was at the Grange a couple of weeks ago, and just to be nosy and all everything else, I went round to emergency department just to have a look at the new changing room, the new waiting room that we've got there.
Hopefully it wasn't a change.
No, I don't think I wandered in the wrong place. I'm just going to put my head, and it's fantastic up there. The atmosphere there is so much better than like the old waiting room or changing room that we had there. And there were only a couple or 3 ambulances outside, and I think the last time I was there it was rammed. I think they were queuing up just to get into the car park last time. So I did get talking to a couple of the ambulance crews. I didn't introduce myself or anything. I just said they seem to talk to anybody in a suit up there, to be honest with you. And they brought up culture. I said, "Oh, how things going? It looks a lot better here." And they were still incredibly frustrated with what was going on there, in terms of the weights that they had there, etc., etc. They thought it had gotten better, but it was slipping back, they felt. And their view was that we were very risk averse as an organisation. And they did name another, which I can name if you want, but they named another organisation seemed to do it so much better, they believed, which is Cardiff. So I don't know if there are learnings there for us or anything else, but I say it's a very small sample of 2 ambulance crews, etc. But I thought it looked a lot better than it was. But obviously, in terms of that, we're obviously under tighter targets now and all the rest of it. What makes us believe it's going to be different this time if the culture hasn't changed, or are we, it feels like a cultural thing that has to move rather than anything else. But obviously, in terms of the changes that we have got, how achievable are they given the kind of workforce and capacity that we currently have? Or is there, a request coming from, no, this is what we need now going forward?
Well,
sorry, a few
there's a lot wrapped up in that, really. So if I come back to, I guess, sort of the sort of ambulance piece, and part of the reason that we've met with ambulance this morning is that everyone will have their own view of the world.
I as I say, it was a sample of 2 crews.
No, absolutely, but I think it is really important that as leaders from both WAST and our organisation, we're on the same page about what we're looking to achieve and deliver. They wanted feedback out on the roads. Equally, I could probably give some anecdotal sort of evidence the other way of our teams of back sort of the other way to WAST, but I'm not going to do that because that's not helpful for us. What we must do is work together, communicate well around how we are going to improve and set up the expectations and standards that we expect from our teams and what their role and responsibility is to do that. We have a good relationship with Darren, who's our WAST Lee colleague, and as I've said, there's been a meeting this morning. I couldn't attend because of board, but Matt has attended with the Director of Ops in WAST about how we're going to do this and do this together. I think the cultural piece has to come alongside the transactional doing as well, because we haven't got the luxury of time really, and I think we have made risk-based decisions in terms of our risk aversion. I think we monitor then sort of the quality sort of output of that anyway. I think we are going to have to make another step change. I would agree that some of the risks that we took originally back in September and October, we've stepped back from. So I think there's a conversation, particularly off the back of the letter that's coming on Handover 45 and the expectations set out about if we are to deliver this, what that actually means in terms of risk to us and how we do that in the safest possible way. And in terms of there are some indicators I'm worried about. Demand numbers coming into our emergency department is not where we want it to be. It impacts on wait to be seen. It impacts on our ability to hand over ambulances. But we've got to get into the evidence of why they're turning up to our ED when there are other alternatives available in the SPOR, and I think the work that we're doing elsewhere will help with that.
Sorry, does that mean that we've got the wrong patients turning up there, as it were?
Not necessarily.
In terms of what they got.
Because there's an option to redirect those individuals, and the threshold for, I guess, sort of admitting or bringing someone into an ED is it can be very dependent on the clinician that's sort of sat at the front door, based on experience and confidence, and also I think sort of if an incident goes wrong as well sometimes. So there is some work for us to do, I think myself and the clinical execs, about the risks that we are prepared to take to deliver this, and I think when we've had that, I think, conversation and the clarity on the ask on Handover 45, we may well need to come back to board, I think, to share where we've got to on that risk-based discussion with you.
On that 45 piece then, are we being, I know we've got the words in there, intentionally ambitious, I think is the actual report. are we almost setting ourselves, do we believe that is achievable, or are we setting ourselves up for failure? And it's back to that kind of management of expectations piece.
We have pushed ourselves to be intentionally ambitious there. We are going to have to go some to deliver it, I'll be very honest, but the expectations from Welsh Government, and I think our will to come out of the escalation sort of we're in, I think it drives us to do that.
Okay, so that comes on to the second one, then can we achieve it with the workforce and the resources that we've got?
With a collective, we did it in September and October. I'll reference that again. So I think we can go back there again. My concern is, I guess, our ability to focus on lots of competing priorities. It will require a laser focus in terms of delivery.
But that's the thing, if you go back to September, October, there was a lot of emphasis on it to drive it forward, and it seems to have slipped back a little bit from there. I mean, blunt about it kind of thing.
Oh, no, you absolutely can. I think, you know, if I reference some of the planned care work, the competing priorities from an organisational perspective, I think there's a, you know, I think it's a fair challenge about, you know, how able we are to do lots of really high profile, difficult things all at once. I think that's a broader conversation in terms of the board.
But that then comes back to the resource piece of having, you know, can you split down that focus onto those things?
And culture. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, next, please.
Thank you, sir. Well, Liam, thank you for this comprehensive thing. I think what has been discussed for my question exactly, for the milestones, especially for the handover times. I was very much interested in two things. One, the assumptions, and some of them you have already mentioned in this discussion, but really the assumptions, and especially getting those numbers there. I mean, what would be the assumptions, which obviously would reflect on the risks as well. But the second, which is more intriguing to me also, is why do you stop at 80%? Why not 100%?
Well, that is
Well, at least the intention. You know.
I think the expectation was we're waiting on, I think, the final clarification from on the handover 45 expectations. At the moment, our de-escalation criteria is based on 1 hour handover, not 45-minute handover. So we are fully expecting to have to resubmit our trajectories. And I think also knowing that we are going into another winter, there is a view, and part of the push around delivery of this by autumn is that we get some sort of stabilisation of performance before we hit what we know will be another difficult sort of or operationally challenged period as well. In terms of the assumptions around the trajectories, they are based on the number of discharges that we need to hit on a daily basis. So we have a target number of discharges that we doesn't always, but it links back directly to our ability to hand over patients from an ambulance perspective. The bits that the deconditioning piece that I referenced sort of earlier when Will talked about sort of the priorities is really, really important, because I think that's how we need to engage with our clinical staff on the wards around reinforcing the message around deconditioning to help drive the discharge to get to the targets that we need to. But it's a quality then patient safety conversation, not a performance conversation. You know, we are here for one reason, and that's to be better for our patients and for those outcomes to be improved. So whilst the performance is an indicator of that, I think taking a conversation to sort of deconditioning, look at it down sort of, and CEMA has organised a great sort of opportunity for sort of a national lead on deconditioning to come and talk to our clinical staff in early June. That will be a precursor, I think, for us driving forward discharge on the back end of the case.
I also visited the Grange on Sunday, but for legitimate reasons, because I was visiting a relative, and I have to say that the entire visit in the hospital, I met somebody in the lift who was from PALS, and they were full of energy and enthusiasm. I went on to the ward, the staff were incredibly helpful and supportive. And when I spoke to the person I was visiting, she said that the whole experience was about kindness and support and excellent in terms of experience. And so the whole thing was great. What I want to raise is the issue of hospital signage, because when you travel down, the whole idea of the Grange was a critical care centre, not an A&E. So as you drive in, there's a big sign saying this is not an A&E, and you're thinking, well, actually it is an A&E, isn't it? Because everybody's come here for the A&E. You've got blue signs, red signs, all sorts of signs. So at some point, could the estates look at the actual signage? Because I think there's a not quite as how can I put this, clarity over it, and it may be useful just to look at that at some point when you're on your travels, looking around, thinking, what does that sign mean? And I was just intrigued by the fact that you know, this is not an A&E when all the ambulances are driving around the back.
Note that plus food for consideration.
I will bore you to death over coffee on sort of the Welsh Government sort of rules on hospital signage, Paul. Trust me, we lived and breathed it during the
But I think the whole point is to try to, people don't understand the difference between accident and emergency department. It's about, this is not really a minor injuries unit, is what is the message. But I do understand, I think it can be quite confusing. So we take it on board and fix it.
Okay, Helen, next please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's just at the end you noted that we were now piloting a new Welsh emergency care standards. Are we piloting because we're already in special measures and I think we would be a good way of trying these out, or did we volunteer to do it? And are the standards very different from what we're already trying to aim for?
We didn't volunteer to do it. I think we were asked, it's fair to say, and we were asked to do it because we have a particular information system that puts us ahead of lots of other hospitals and health boards in relation to the ability to capture that data. So we're doing that alongside Betsy, I'm going to say, is it Betsy? So we have Symphony in place in our emergency department. It's one of the reasons why I think our Wait to Be Seen stands out compared to other health boards, because I don't think they have the same standards of data that we do. Notwithstanding, we're monitoring our trends, so we know that we need to do better on that. So it wasn't volunteered, it was asked of us.
For a positive reason.
Possibly. I mean, I think there is a view from the clinical teams that there is a lot of data that they are asking for. And I think there's probably a skepticism around, I don't know, for example, one of the questions I think maybe that keeps coming up on e-triage is, which room did you injure yourself in? Because for some reason that might be helpful for another data source elsewhere. So I think there's a skepticism around that, but I suspect we're not really in a position to turn it down really. Steve.
Yeah, just on that one. So as well, I think the driver behind it is that the current metrics possibly are not. The clinical view would be that are they capturing the right measures around, you know, the information we need about the emergency department. So that's the basis of it. Okay. To try different metrics rather than the traditional 4-hour target. Okay. Is that fit for purpose in the current environment? But they have put it on pause at the minute while I think the new government's in
performance framework
is working. So we kind of got a little bit of breathing space, but it will potentially come back, as Leanne said, to change our metrics. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Yeah, going back to the ambulance issue, Leanne, you mentioned that we've only got one space for ambulance triage, and I just wanted to understand how we're at that point and what's the ambition for that, because it seems quite surprising. And the other one on the conversation about culture, the paper talks about this academy, UEC Academy. Yeah. So given that culture seems to be a big part of this and having a culture shift, and that's, you know, how significant is it and how quickly is that going to be rolled out?
Yeah, thank you for that. I meant to mention the academy, so thank you for the prompt on the second part. The original design of the building only had one space for ambulance triage. Lots of the Grange space was designed with perfect processes. So they expected immediately into triage, move through into sort of trolley space. So that's why there was only one there. We know that that's not how life works, and certainly hasn't been our experience. As you know, the Grange was only originally meant to be for ambulance conveyance, not sort of walk-ins, and we know that the numbers are nowhere close to that. So the redesign of the internal works looks at doubling the space that we've got for triage. It's not unusual for us to have multiple crews turn up at one time. So actually our ability to, when patients need to be triaged, our ability to take them into the building, undertake that triage to look at the clinical risk assessment and then sort of move them through to their pathway, I think will be key. So certainly a doubling of that space will be very much welcomed, I think, because we've seen that pattern of presentation sort of happen. The UEC Academy, I was going to raise it when we were talking about accreditation earlier. We're trying to bring it in planned care as well, cancer, around instilling some standards, ways of behaviour, that those values and behaviours and the culture to drive forward and really champion what we're trying to achieve and a priority from an organisational perspective. So it's in its infancy. We see it as a supplementary piece for the cultural work and the delivery of it, but it will be sort of very important. So thank you for prompting on that.
Well, yeah, thanks. Great report, I think, Leanne. I think it's really welcome, and I guess the amount of discussion we had this morning is shows just how much people are interested and want to look at some improvement. I guess for me, a lot of the issues are outside the Grange, aren't they? We're trying to deal with the Grange, and this report fundamentally is about that. But lots of our issues are primarily not within the gift of the staff who were there. And I just wonder, just picking up a couple of the issues, this ambulance, this 45 issue. I mean, we are saying it's going to be very challenging for us, isn't it? I mean, we are saying that within 12 weeks, we're going to be at 80% compliance to that. I don't know what we're doing at the minute. I mean, we've said 60% by the end of this month. We'll probably be making that. I guess that extra 20% is going to take some doing. And I just wonder whether, are we looking at why are people getting in an ambulance and getting to the Grange as well as part of it? I mean, what are our conveyancing rates like, and are they appropriate? And whether we're actually, is there any way that we can actually examine some of that? And I'm sure probably Jenny's on that, probably from some of her background previously. But I mean, it would be interesting to know, are we out of line in terms of the numbers of people that we're conveying? Just as one issue. The other one, looking at the report in terms of the governance arrangements, it looks a lot of governance. It looks a lot of gatherings, a lot of infrastructure, lots of people. And I just wonder whether it would be worth another look at that, because that's going to take an awful lot of maintenance and a lot of work. And I just wondered if we could streamline that. Could we cut the action quicker? I mean, what people in the private sector criticise the public sector for, as soon as we've got a problem, we set up all this bureaucracy. But I just wonder whether we could perhaps have another look at it, because I know it's very complex, but the more groups you have, the more difficult it is to keep synergy between them anyway, isn't it? And I just wonder whether that would be worth just a 5-minute another look, really. And the other issue that I wasn't clear about from the report was the finance one. I mean, there's a lot of change that we'd expect the people to do here, and often when people hear the word change, they kind of link that with saving money. But what we're saying here is that the financial envelope that we have in this system is staying there. I think that's what we're really saying. And what this is about is efficiency, using the money differently. But this isn't part of our saving plan. Is that correct? We're interested to know whether that is the basis on which we are working here. This is a service improvement. There may be some financial gain, and if there's financial gain, then that would be reinvested in the service. Is that what we're saying?
I don't think we've made a call on any reinvestment, Phil. I think we're already spending a lot of money on sort of UEC, either through sort of additional capacity and or extra staff to supplement it. So the assumption that the money in particular we deliberately strayed away from in relation to this paper, but there is an expectation we review the costs and look at what we can release back in terms of financial sustainability in the plan, not at the expense of quality or safety. I think it's important to quote that we are spending money now, not in the best way would be. So one of the key, in fact, I picked it up with my team sort of this week about us doing a deep dive into those finances and like looking at what we're spending for what purpose and then sort of, I guess, the risk benefit of that. So more than happy to bring back sort of another report at some point on that. I'm sure it'll be touched on in the finance performance section anyway, Phil, but deliberate sort of stray away from the money. Not because we're not cognizant of the importance of financial sustainability, but because I think there's a big enough ask in terms of the delivery sort of element in this. So that's the first thing. In relation to the governance, anyone that works with me or knows with me well, one of the things I want on Teams is a money counter that says, am I adding value in this meeting? Is it necessary? So because it is so complex, those work streams have been set up with a delivery focus. It's not committees or a chat room. We have a discipline around milestones, I think, and they're pretty ambitious. I think the problem is if you bring them together, you won't give the delivery focus, I think, sufficient scrutiny, I think, if I'm really honest, all the time, I think, to deal with the risks and issues that prevent that delivery. And so I'm more than happy to review with Nicola and Rani on that point, but I think because it is so complex, it does require almost a laser focus on that particular topic from a delivery sort of lens. And just back to your first question, because I'm taking them in reverse. Show my mental agility here, Phil, which is not so great, is that pre-hospital, I guess, sort of opportunity. So I think we see dashboards that look at our performance from an ambulance perspective. Lots of the focus has been on what we can do, but we do need to work in partnership with WAST colleagues around not just ambulance, but 111 as well. In fact, there's been a conversation about sort of whether we take sort of funding back in and try to design sort of our own system. And the first pillar of the revised national priority programme is pre-hospital and community. So there is a really heavy focus on that. I believe there's more we can do on the alternative pathways. I think our single point of access navigation system that I referenced earlier when I talked about priorities will be key to enable that. As well as all the preventative work that's happening in place-based care. But absolutely, we've got to focus on the things that, on the whole system. I guess the focus on ambulances, we have a lever that we have to pull now. And I think we have an element of control over that for ourselves, really.
Well, I mean, to get out of the spotlight now, we have to fix that, don't we? Because unless we fix that, everything else will almost be. That's the barometer that the outside world are looking at, is what's your ambulance handover like. They kind of take a reading from that, basically to tell us how well we're doing with everything else. So I think it's very important that we do that.
I think it's really important, back to Ewan's point around Cardiff. You know, we don't just look at, it's really important we don't just look at one metric. We need to consider risk in the round, you know, the impact of delays in our department, our 12-hour performance as well. Our outcomes, it needs to be a rounded view of what we're achieving on UEC. I know from some of the other metrics, other health boards might deliver on the ambulances, but they don't deliver on other things. So I think we have to make sure, I think, as guardians of our population and our patients, that we stand back and say, we accept that we need to do better on that, but here are all of the things that matter.
Some of the things that matter seem simple, but they're very difficult to fix, aren't they? I mean, Paul's point about signage, very, very difficult to fix signage, isn't it? I mean, I was the design champion in the early part of the board when we were looking at the new hospital. And at that time, a friend of mine said to me, I've just finished my PhD and there's a huge chapter on signage. She gave me the thesis. It was so complex, I couldn't find my way around it, so I gave it back. I think that's it. It's very, very hard to get that right. But I think those simple things can actually make a huge difference.
Yeah, just briefly on those. So village and meetings, I agree, but all those structures are in place now. They're not. Just bringing them together and how we can streamline them and trying to keep the limit of how long we've had those meetings. But they not new, is trying to get a bit of. I think on the finance bit, there, you know, if we can sort some of the UEC, there will be financial benefits. And that's what we are planning for. That it will stop us boarding, it will stop us opening up extra capacity. It will enable us to potentially reduce capacity in places if we can deliver on this. So the two come together.
That's fine.
But it's not explicit because we're working that through. And I just want to kind of.
My point on the finance was how we sell the message, change it. This isn't primarily about trying to take money out.
No, this is about making the difference, which should then give us a And then just finally, one of the discussions we've been having, you know, with NHSP and I is moving to a 45-minute average handover, maybe as a first step and then nobody waiting on 45 minutes. And whilst there's one metric, is how long people wait beyond 45 minutes is also really important to us, because those total lost hours is a much truer metric about how many ambulances are not, how long ambulances are not on the road. There was, last week we had a really positive week. Last Friday, 95% of our ambulances were handed over in 45 minutes. We had an average handover time of 13 minutes. We had a couple of really good days together, and then our learning from those good days is as important for the challenging days, and demand is a key factor in terms of that, making sure people only come into the hospital when they need to. So demand was the biggest factor as to us seeing our improvement last week. But there are days where you can see those opportunities coming through. Thank you.
Yeah, I smiled at your comment about public and private sector views of each other. As a private sector person, I'm actually going to spring to the defence of this governance model, in as much as I think there are times when priorities have to be set, and my interpretation of this governance model is that it prioritises focus and attention on, the key area of urgent and emergency care at a specific moment when it is driving escalation status, and therefore it fully merits, I think, its rising to the top of the agenda. And I think this governance model actually doesn't say, look, we're always going to have all these committees and things. It just recognises the urgency and priority of this particular area of operation. And speaking, if you like, with my finance performance hat on, it was such a brilliant example, I think, earlier this morning about the impact of quality on sickness and absenteeism. And I would just love to have seen the financial metrics that we could tie directly to, those numbers that we saw on that, because it's a classic example, I think, where we can, instead of it's brilliant that Rob has spent £43 million worth of savings, but we can't keep on finding more and more and more. And the potential, I think, for dealing with our financial problems is if we can unlock these operational process and performance problems. They're so interlinked. So I think this governance is really good for this.
Yeah, just a couple of points. We had our urgent care interview last week, and one of the things that really stood out, looking at the positives that are there as well in the annual GMC survey, they were first in the UK for overall satisfaction and first in the UK for local teaching. So whilst we've got challenges, we should reflect on the good things that are done as well. And just secondly, on signage, this is not a solution to all of the problems. I'm working on a proposal at the moment around how we can put in a digital solution to support patients navigating our sites that we can integrate with the NHS Wales app, for example. Once we've done that, then I was hoping to have a chat with Paul about opportunities around charitable funds for that, given us, a solution that some of our patients will see as very useful and help ease anxiety before coming into hospital, because it's been implemented in Alder Hey Hospital, been really successful and seeing really good outcomes.
Okay.
Not particularly on that, but I just wanted to pass my thanks to Hannah's team, Claire and Kate and Simon, that has helped enormously with pulling the plan together, and Matt and and the divisional teams, I think, for the production of the plan. I think it gives a very, as references, a clear North Star for us now from a delivery perspective. So just really grateful for an enormous amount of effort that's been put into the plan to bring it this far.
Thanks everybody this morning. I know we've gone over a lot of time for this, but this is and has to be one of our main priorities going forward while we're in escalation. So I think it's been really helpful for the discussion. Most of this now will take place through the Finance and Performance Committee, but also this will be a standing item on our agenda going forward. We're not taking it back to board. So good progress, hopefully see you now in the next couple of months. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. If members are happy with the assurance we've had on the presentation and update. Next item then is the delivery framework and the annual plan and please present those.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thanks, Chair. So colleagues will obviously recall in the March meeting we approved the plan, and as Nicola touched on earlier how we've had some feedback and some further work. So the focus of this is just to give clarity and update on how we go about delivering and tracking delivery of the plan. And there are a couple of interrelated methods and approaches we do and take for that. So that's the real purpose of this paper. So three key ways we do that. The first is through our management structures, cascaded through our delegation and our accountability arrangements. We signed off an updated performance management and accountability framework in September last year. And so the actions we take to delegate and delivery within the plan is kind of enacted through that performance management framework. So some key examples and practical sort of pieces of that are each exec director will have an accountability letter setting out their bits of the plan to deliver and both their sort of individual deliverables and metrics and or any shared ones. Similarly, following that process, divisional directors, my team support Leanne and then cascading hers. It's quite a meaty one. Her accountability conditions through to divisional directors, and then other colleagues may do that within their own team. So, being really clear with what the plan said and how each teams, each exec directors, and each division's part of that plan is a key part of how we do plan delivery. That then is tracked through the monthly divisional assurance and the twice yearly 6-month and end of year reviews. We've talked about the end of year reviews a few times today. So they track delivery for the relevant team. And the kind of the next part of that performance and accountability framework is the escalation arrangements, which we updated in the September framework. So teams who aren't delivering in line with plan hitting certain triggers put into escalation. We report on that escalation through to Finance and Performance Committee. So that's the first bit of it, but really important bit. The other two ways we support and drive delivery of plan, the example is we've just had in terms of talking about EHC is through a programme approach. And we don't put, I guess, to the point earlier around governance for governance sake, is we put programmes in place where it is more of a whole system or additional focus or additional enabling support required to drive improvement. So we have two portfolios of programmes, as the paper sets out. We have the value and sustainability portfolio of programmes. The paper summarises those areas. They mirror the national programmes, as well as we've added key projects and priorities that underpin our financial plan. And then we have our service change programmes. These are key to delivering commitments in the plan. They're also key to delivering commitments within our strategy as well. So we have, as you see, proposed on page 4, 6 strategic change programmes: prevention, place-based care, planned care and cancer, separate programmes but work very tightly together, urgent emergency care, as we've talked through, and mental health. So it's really important that these programmes aren't generating a whole new kind of to-do list. They are there as mechanisms to deliver commitments in the plan, but also, as we've just picked up in terms of new requirements around handover 45, pick up, address, and agile to any new priorities that come in year. So the paper at the bottom of page 4 sets out a high level the work streams under each of those programmes, and in terms of reporting, they'll report through to exec committee, and then as a bundle through to the planning, the population health planning and partnerships committee, and then, as we've touched on and we'll pick up in the next report, the additional focus due to escalation for urgent emergency care through to F&P. We've also scheduled, with Rani's help, a series of deep dives into the priority programmes to come forward to the board. But so we've got those initial dates set out there, but clearly, as and when through actions or forward plan, we need to increase the frequency of those. We will do it at the board's request. So that's all I was going to say, Chair, just to give an overview of the processes we've got in place to support plan delivery. Oh, sorry, there was one more thing. Then we track delivery of all the commitments in the plan. Obviously at programme and at the meetings I touched on, but also through, we'll come on in a later item to talk about the performance report. That performance report is directly linked to the commitments in the plan. So whether the trajectories or the milestones, so all in one place, on a regular board meeting, we've received that update, which is again a key part of tracking delivery. So sorry, I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you, Anna. Helen, please.
Yeah, really welcome that we're going to have the deep dives going forward. I think that'll be a really useful addition to the board meetings. I just wondered, on the work streams, we've got 6 there, and could we get Torvine added in on the place-based care? Because we've listed all the authorities, but Torvine's missing.
I noticed, yeah, it's because the box is too small.
Oh,
it's because it says blind.
They're not being excluded then.
They're absolutely not. I saw it when I was looking at it. It's just the box that because we work with them, they're obviously doing more and more work together. They're ISP working together, so that's what that is.
Right. Okay.
Definitely do. With Torvine, but I'm in a meeting with them tomorrow. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? Ewan, please.
This might be a rambling one again, might not be a question being drafted. But I was just linking a few things together, and within this performance plan, I'm wondering if we need something around almost the corporate side of it in terms of things like headcount. Because if you look in your next report, in terms of headcount, we're about 1% over in terms of total headcount as to where we wanted to be in the INCP last year. There are things like workspace. We had a report to audit committee yesterday saying that we're only utilising our administrative office space up to 25%, which is, blew my mind, to be honest with you. So there are a lot of things like that that obviously drive a lot of cost within the business. If our headcount is 1% more than we intended it to be, so headcount about 900 million. Yeah, so that's 9 million quid worth, which we may well have authorised through the board, but there's some of it I'm sure that we haven't. I'm wondering if we need some kind of metrics like that as an aside to this, saying, look, from a corporate side, we're not actually on track with all the things that drive everything else.
Yes, so a couple of things on that. So I guess the first one is, as corporate departments, we also have the reviews, not as frequent as the operational, but we have those reviews. But I guess importantly on some of those metrics, I look to Sarah, I think that particular one we picked up because we've got the workforce theme in the value and sustainability portfolio I referenced. A lot of work and a lot of conversations about taking that, expanding that in terms of not that it was doing more than variable pay, but expanding the breadth and cover of that. So we have got a workforce programme directly linked to value and sustainability.
In terms of the quality improvement side, if that's driving down our absence levels, then our absence levels are ridiculously high at the moment. It's all of those things drive our actual cost base.
Yeah, I think. Would you agree that's picked up in
the things plan in terms of the value and sustainability work stream? It's how we might want to report that and see that coming through. Something
I just think there seems to be a lot of dots all over the place. It's just joining them up, or what's actually driving the cost base of them.
Yeah, I would just on because we're linking the programme to cost. If I could, it's mentioned in the paper, but clearly there are some opportunities within the service change programme. They're not all sort of separate from each other. So we're looking at work on theatres. We had a meeting yesterday. We're looking at right sizing bed capacity, and rather than so we avoid the duplication of meetings. But and the example we heard this morning, where doing the right thing can actually drive down then out costs, and some of it is actually in our financial plan. So some of these programmes will be sort of dual reporting, not actual having to do 2 reports, but we'll have theatres, conversation about the theatres work in the planned care programme. We'll have the conversation about the theatres work in the value and sustainability portfolio as well, because it's a key part of our finance plan.
Thanks. David, please.
Yeah, I'm pleased to see this, and it's good to see how everything fits together. One of the things I was I'm particularly interested in, but there's a bunch of items which are really cross-cutting across all of those priority programs, the value and sustainability work and various things. So a workforce is a good example. There's also digital and technology, which is a fundamental part of delivering all of these types, all these different things. And what I'm interested in is how can we clearly articulate and pull out where those cross-cutting things are and where there might be prioritization calls needed within those cross-cutting things or blockers that might be impacting others. So one of the reasons why I'm partly asking that is within the list of these 6 priority programs, there's a long list of digital and technology requirements, enablers, things that are desperately needed in order to make those priority programs deliver well. And there's a limited amount of stuff that Paul and his teams can do, and there's got to be a prioritization effort for Paul's stuff to be able to deliver. And if something takes longer in one, that might then have a knock-on impact on another program. And how as the executives and within the organisation have been managing that conflict and that prioritization effort and reprioritization effort over the year to make sure that as much of this delivers on track as possible.
Yeah, just quickly, I I think it's probably a mission from the paper, and that's not having, because as you know, we Paul brought something through to execs recently, didn't you, in terms of to re-prioritise in line with what we're doing. So there are, you know, and we've had a couple of us had an email correspondence go around this morning about looking at, you know, how we use the capital to support and enable some of these priority areas as well as managing risk. So yeah, apologies, I think it's probably a mission more from the paper that we don't have it in place. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think so the way we've set it up, we've refreshed our governance recently. So we have divisional engagement meetings where we discuss with senior members of each division their priorities that they have. We're then looking to bring those together to discuss one of the Allianz cross-divisional to get that wider view. And we're also in the process of setting up our new digital data and technology group, which Seema has agreed to chair, to make sure that we're clinically led. And that group then will really look at it more holistically against these are all the asks of our divisions. This is kind of what we need to do from a strategic perspective. And obviously then get those priorities discussed, ratified, and that we can take through to executive committee. So I kind of how we look to work going forward, because we do have hundreds of items on our backlog as it currently stands.
Yeah, that's partly what I was what I wanted to pull out is we had the Audit Wales report on digital transformation come through relatively recently, audit committee, and we as a board, what I picked pulled out is as a board we don't focus enough on some of our internal. We focus quite a lot on the national programs because they are big, expensive, they quite often go wrong. We don't spend enough time focusing on some of our internal stuff. It would be useful to sort of understand that in a bit more detail, particularly that prioritisation. Because, for example, there's an enabler in place-based care, for example, where we need to make sure we've got the right data pulling out in the right places. There's another enabler in urgent care around data and data standards. There's another enabler within someone that's similar. And how do we just make sure that we're aligned in a way that means that if we've only got 4 people, we've got 8 projects, how do we make sure we actually are focusing on the right one? Where's priority call? So I just think it'd be useful to think about how we do that. And obviously I picked on digital and technology because that's my own area of expertise, but that clearly is a cross-cutting thing across workforce, across finance, across all these other cross-cutting areas.
We're also presenting at the regional committee on Friday from a digital data and technology perspective, and there's so much synergy between in our region what we're doing and how can we potentially reduce some of the duplication and support each other as organisations as well. So there's quite a few opportunities in that space.
Just the issue as well, I raised actually some of this in our meeting last week. I think it was only before, because my previous role, 2008 to 2014, I oversaw customer care and ICT. And one of the areas in particular during this height of austerity was about bringing in a digital transformation team. Again, the balance right between what are the systems, first of all, the team are trying to prop up, which are due to fall over, or systems need renewing because they come to the end of life. But at the same time, where do you get cashable efficiencies from, and where you get performance efficiencies? And there's a balance around the work program, especially if you've got a small team. That's something I talked to Paul about. I was going to put him in touch with colleagues from my previous role in terms of how we've been used that small team as some of the experiences and some examples we've done. Because I think there's a lot of shared learning between health, but between the sectors, and myself and Paul talked about is there opportunities to look at other shared learning to bring into this. So I think it'd be useful to highlight that. Okay, I've got Rob and I'll come to Paul then.
Interesting. I was going to say, sort of reflect something what you've just said, actually, Andrew, in terms of obviously we've got massive list of priorities, but what are our real top priorities to deliver the strategic highest level of priority, and also the benefits, as well as in the session the other day, which was somebody described digital and IT is now like water, isn't it? You know, if your laptop breaks, like having your hands chopped off. So there's a priority for us around the what we choose to do, aligned with our most important areas, and it applies to all investments. And the return as well is very important as well, to get clarity on that. So as you can imagine, as execs, we talk about this quite a lot, but I just need to keep going with it. We may get some support nationally. Our IMTP identifies anticipated income of potentially £6 million from a national fund. There's a process at the moment going through, which we've bid for that. We'll see how lucky or fortunate we are with the outcomes of that as well. Thanks.
Thanks. Paul, please.
Paul. Yeah, I just wanted to ask sort of the current status. First of all, terrific job. I mean, incredibly detailed, etc. With like ministerial priorities, they were the last minister's priorities. So where are we with regard to the overall plans? I mean, when I talked to Andrew about the landscape, it's incredibly cluttered in terms of we've got a plan for this, expect to do that, expect to do this, expect to do this. Perhaps there's an opportunity for us to, via the new regime at HQ in Cardiff Bay, to sort of say, can we just unclutter all this, just focus on something which is very clear, one plan, rather than former minister's plan and new minister's plan. So I'm just wondering whether there's whether that's going to cause you more of a headache.
So what this paper sets out is how we're going to deliver our plan, the plan that we signed off with risks, issues, assumptions, etc., that responded to the extant requirements as well as our internal priorities. And so we are going to, should new requirements or directives come through under the new government, I mean, we've got the 100-day plan as it stands. I don't know whether either Andrew or Nicola have any more intel, but we haven't had the next level of granularity in terms of a direction that's going to change. So I think we have to stick to our plan, and if should something come in, we'll have to consider that in the context of our plan. Does it align? Do we need to change our plan? Do we need to reprioritize? But I don't know what, if something else will come out, but it would be surprising if nothing changed, wouldn't it?
Because there was definitely a focus on prevention, I noticed, in the talk from the different parties. I think I'm right in saying that, or it's more of a focus. And can I just say, what can we do to help you to deliver the plan? Anything the board can do to support or do anything to help you?
I think in terms of the challenge, we get helpful challenge when we have the deep dives, when we bring progress and updates through, and it will be from a programme perspective that exec leads will call on support, no doubt, as required, recognising that obviously we've got through the management structures as well, but we'll start to get into some of the performance and delivery challenges through the additional F&P.
Thank you.
Members all content and happy with the assurance on this?
Yes.
Okay, on to the next item, 5.3, which is the board level committee governance arrangements during escalation of MEP as well.
Thanks, Chair. I won't go through the paper in detail. We've touched on this and then this morning. I'll take the paper as read. The paper requests approval to some temporary changes to our finance performance committee arrangements during level 4 escalation, with a monthly focus on areas of level 4 escalation and continuing routine business through ongoing routine arrangements for the committee. Thank you.
Oh, excellent.
Okay.
Jordan Charles.
we've covered some of this morning. We've had a good discussion in fairness. Everybody happy with this? Any further comments or questions? If not, are we happy to approve? Discontent, so that's approved. Okay. On to next item, item 5.4 for
Performance.
members, if we take this item, then we go to the break after this, if that's okay. So 5.4 is the 25-26 performance reporting. Anna, please present.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies if this isn't quite as quick as Ronnie's last item. So the performance report we've got is taking the information up to the end of March where we have it. So it's kind of like our end of year report of what we delivered last year. Some of these areas have obviously been either trailed in the chief exec update and or Leanne's section earlier. So I'll try not to repeat. Appreciate there's a lot of information in the appendix. As I touched on in my last item, that is because we are tracking all the commitments within the plan. So I'll just give some, if hopefully helpful, just draw out some headlines against each of the areas, some areas of progress and some areas of challenge before handing over to Sarah and workforce and Jenny on quality and safety. So I'll take prevention and primary care together as I usually do. So you can see still good progress in terms of our early years screening. Really important we get the first start, best start in life, and that focus. We haven't got the full year data yet, but we are exceeding the targets there. Positive again in terms of the diabetes care processes. Still further work to do, but we have met the trajectory, well, marginally exceeded that we set ourselves and are planning the closure reports. I understand it from the QI project to get all of that learning. We continue to see really good contribution in terms of the activity of our primary care contractors, particularly community pharmacy in terms of the PIPS activity, the independent prescribers and the common ailment scheme. Over delivering against their trajectory, similar optometry and supporting that demand moderation into the system. Where we have challenges in this area, so I'd say vaccination, we are pleased that we are across our various vaccination programmes, we're in a better place than we were last year, and we're better than the All Wales average. But that's not good enough for us, is it, Tracy? We want to be even better in terms of we haven't hit the standards yet. In many areas we didn't achieve that herd immunity, so huge amount of focus effort still going on in vaccination through our vaccination equity plan that Tracy leads, and it was actually a theme for those colleagues who were there when we had a bit of an RPD workshop looking at winter. I'm sure Will from your team will feedback some of the offers around using some joint assets places to do some more pop-up clinics. So real priority as we go forward into this year and into winter. Similarly, smoking cessation performance has been challenged. We have only got Q3 data again, and our unvalidated data does suggest that has improved further. And again, Tracy leading work on involving some of the behavioural change practitioners across a number of these areas to support individuals in their community. UEC, the data, as we've already talked about, does show improvement. It's really important that we hold on to that and celebrate. It shows improvement in ambulance handover delays, but clearly we're not where we need to be. Some areas more stubborn than others in terms of wait to be seen, and in Grange ED 12 hours, although we should note, 12 hours across the system, we are a very high performing organisation. Our pathway care delays, whilst maybe not a trajectory, they have come down. But I think in terms of the actions, I wasn't going to spend more time on that, Chair, because we've had a very lengthy conversation on UEC, the plan and the detail and the ambition for improvement. Planned care and cancer. Again, Nicola touched on some of this in her update. So the performance against the 62-day cancer standard, the single cancer pathway, did increase to 63.1% in March, which is really positive, but we're still off the trajectory and the standard. I think it is important to note that our PTL, so that is the patient treatment list, so that's the total number of patients we are tracking through on a suspected cancer pathway. That can be susceptible to variations in demand, fluctuations in demand. That's gone down from a peak of around 3,900 in July, actually driven by dermatology, but that's down to around 3,200 now, which is really important in terms of the ability of our staff in cancer services to track, step by step those patients through. And positively, notwithstanding the fluctuations in that PTL, maintaining less than 10% in terms of backlog for 62 days. We do still have some targeted work with some of the specifically challenged tumour sites, upper and lower GI and urology, with a lot of focus on the improvements required to get those into a more sustainable position. From an RTT perspective, as Nicholas said, by the end of last year, lots of non-recurrent money and huge amounts of efforts from the team. We got the 104 weeks waits down to just 23 patients in orthopaedics, and I touched on the cement issue. Would say that those 23 patients were out of a total of around 2,600 patients waiting over 2 years across all of Wales. So we were an extremely small proportion of that, which is positive. Patients waiting over 52 weeks for outpatients, we were below, so we improved on our planned trajectory, but didn't quite achieve the target, or didn't achieve the target of 0. And again, Nicola mentioned diagnostics, the standard of patients not waiting more than 8 weeks. We significantly reduced that to 233. And again, for context, so at the end of the year across Wales, there was over 24,500 patients waiting over 8 weeks for diagnostics, and only 233 of those were ours. So huge amounts of work in those in delivering that additional activity through the non-recurrent monies. And now the challenge is, as Nicholas said, the sustaining and the work to mitigate any worsening of that position now the non-recurrent investments have ceased. The report as well picks up some of our key efficiency and productivity metrics, which is probably fair to say is mixed. We've made good progress on some of the outpatient areas in terms of DNA rates and use of alternatives such as SOS and PIFU pathways. And I think I mentioned it earlier in the context of the earlier item, theatre efficiency is an absolute priority for us. Again, these metrics are mixed. We perform really well at protecting elective capacity. We do really well at day case rates, but whilst there have been some improvements, the late starts and early finishes are a real area of challenge for us. And we had our first theatre efficiency optimisation board yesterday to go through the detail of the underpinning improvements for that work. Again, lots of engagement from across the divisions and other corporate teams. So then finally on mental health, significant progress. The progress that we've seen throughout the year and in previous years have been sustained. So we ended the year in a really positive position with the Part 1A and 1B adults and children's. But where our challenges are is around the psychological therapy rates for adults. You'll see in the run charts, we made good progress in the summer. That has deteriorated. We have had a little bit of data issues, but notwithstanding, once they are sort of resolved, we still have an area of focus. Not that we shouldn't take necessarily assurance from it, but it is clearly an area where across Wales there are challenges. We maybe one health board appearing to do better, so we'll pick up some learning from that health board. And finally, the other area of challenge under the mental health theme is around ND for children. We've made good progress and we are actually leading the way in Wales on this, but clearly an awful lot of work to do. Whilst we can see fluctuations in demand have challenged our ability against the RTT standard, we are very focused on keeping the weights at below 52 weeks, recognising in some other areas across Wales this is at 3 years, so huge amount of effort to sustain at that level in spite of demand increases, but also improve further, and some additional investments coming into the organisation to support that. That's all I'll say on the various areas of operational performance. I don't know if Chair, if you want to take any questions on that or go to the, or me to hand to Sarah on the workforce piece.
Any questions at this point?
Thank you.
Two very quick things. First of all, it's really good to see sort of the increase in demand on the primary care independent prescribing service and the elements. Really good to see that that's doing so well. It's increased quite a bit, and I'm hoping that is decreasing demand on GPs and various others. So fingers crossed.
It's hard
good
to do the counterfactual sometimes, isn't it? But it's,
but I would hope so.
It's there.
It's looking very positive, and it's a good set of figures to have. I did have a question specifically about the stroke data, and I was hoping to get a bit of an understanding of what we've obviously the number we've been concerned about the stroke numbers for quite a while, and we found an error, and we now got a better result. I'm just wondering if you've got a sense of what was the problem that was causing that artificially low data in previous reports.
I don't know if you know. I don't know about what the data issue is. I can say that in terms of the improvement actions, execs, I know Peter's not here. He brought a stroke improvement plan to execs last week that we went through in detail, and it is going to F&P at beginning of June. I don't know if you know the technicalities of what was going on behind the data. Historically, there's been sort of issues with sort of almost manual data capture and needing to have sort of dedicated staff to do that. So, and we have had gaps in the past. I will go back and double check and confirm and come back to you, David, on that. I think just to confirm the position.
It's quite a spike from like 1% up to 20%. So that's quite a big change. Understanding what was the cause of that. Obviously, I know that the model or the official reporting and metrics almost artificially depresses our figure because it assumes that because of the way our model is set up doesn't match some of the national reporting standards, which means we get an artificially low data anyway. But it'd just be useful to understand what caused that increase from 1 to 20.
Yeah, but notwithstanding the data issue, we have got improvements we need to make.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah.
And then we'll.
Yep, thanks for this. I mean, there's some really good improvements in there, some really good performance. But I was drawn to the 52-day cancer target where we're not reaching our target. I wonder how that benchmarks across Wales and whether both other people are to the target. And is the 70%, is that a Welsh Government target? I guess it is, yeah. And I just wondered what are the weights like for the 30% or so that are not in the 62-day remit in a sense. I mean, if we are getting to 62 days for 70%, even if we are milking that, there's a cohort of people who are not in that. I just wondered what the kind of wait time range of wait is like outside that.
Well, do you want me to pick that? Hannah will do a sort of comparison sort of on an all-Wales basis. I think there's a couple of things to note on cancer performance, I think, for awareness of the board, if you're not familiar with it. The first is that patient choice is not allowed to be reset. So lots of our very long waiting patients are either as a result of delays in patients making an appointment or choosing not to take up an appointment. I know that sounds very incredible given they're on a cancer pathway, but it is not unusual. So we look not just at the performance of delivery against the 62-day target, but we look at Hannah's reference, the PTL, the patient list that we have around the longest wait that they've got on the list. And when I've asked the teams to do individual deep dives on that, to bring that weight down, because clearly cancer is very worrying for patients and their families. Invariably, I'd say 9 times out of 10, those long waits are down to patient choice that we don't and can't adjust for because within the rules. I think that's the first thing to say. And then the second point that I would just like to make as well on the cancer pathway is that not all of this is within our gift. So our patients go to Velindre or to Cardiff or to other providers to receive their care. We have standards and targets set within the pathways as well that that we have to adhere to. So time to diagnosis, for example, time to first outpatient, some notional targets that we set. But we aren't always able to influence, I guess, sort of delivery of this target. That said, on cancer, because I think we can do better. I think even when you look outside of the performance, our outcomes, some of our inequalities are pretty shocking. I think as a health board, we have to do better at this, and there's a commitment and a revised plan that will come forward. That we have, I've lost my train of thought now. I think sort of, I've completely lost my train of thought. Sorry, Phil. I was on one then.
Yeah, that's interesting, the patient choice issue. I mean, I would never have thought that really. But what kind of patient choices are we getting then that would delay that pathway then?
They don't understand. Sometimes patients aren't always informed that they're on the cancer pathway, so they don't understand the seriousness of it. Avoidance. People don't always want to face that. We've done a really targeted piece of work. This is a great quality improvement programme. Piece of work around with our lead psychologist in cancer, around DNA rates for patients attending endoscopy. And we've really had to go back to basics around how we're describing that in the letters. And in fact, as a result of that, it's a good news story, I think. We've, in the demand and capacity on endoscopy that I reviewed last night with the guys, they've increased the productivity by 2.5% because as a result of the work they've done, they've reduced cancellations because people are turning up. Yeah. So it's multifactorial. I think the language we use, the honesty that we have, and our processes, I think all combine to that.
Yes, absolutely. Bring with it. I'll come back to you, Hannah.
Hannah, thank you for the report. I did read it, and I think I'm going to need to read it a few times to understand what it's saying. But I think it's really well organised. I've got one really trivial point and then two kind of broader ones. I think you need in the SPC charts to really work on step changes, because some of these graphs actually have shown some real significant changes, and I think the way they're presented doesn't necessarily show that very well. But that's just two other thoughts. The bit that I felt that was really lacking looking at performance was any kind of volumetrics. It gave me a sense of if UEC performance is reducing, is that as a result of UEC demand going up? So that relationship between actually what's the demand we're saying, what are we putting through the system, and then how that relates to performance, because I think otherwise the performance figures are just quite ungrounded in any kind of sense of what's happening in the organisation. Of course, the challenges in having done these reports elsewhere, I'm now making the report twice as long as it already is, which is going to upset other people. So there's a balance to be struck, but I didn't get a sense of the scale and busyness of the organisation. And then the other piece, and actually I'm really pleased you said it, around vaccinations, that we're better than the All Wales average. And I'm not sure how I say this as somebody who doesn't live in Wales, but I wonder how relevant the All Wales average actually is in a lot of these indicators, and whether we should celebrate the fact that we are best in Wales or in the top half of what's happening in Wales, but also look to the rest of the UK as to what best performance or top quartile performance looks there, because that enables us to raise our ambition maybe around some of these performance areas as well, or to give us a real sense of, although we think we might be doing well relative to the rest of Wales, actually related to what's happening elsewhere, our performance is relatively quite poor. So again, adding a whole new set of metrics into it, but I just think that would be a useful lens.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate somebody talked about how we get some of that activity and volume in there, so we'll pick that up. And that's why I said the vaccination stuff in the challenged areas, because yeah, it's interesting that we're doing better than the Welsh average, but as I said, you know, we're not happy that we Tracy. I don't know if you want to come in on that.
You're absolutely right, Will. One of the things, we know what protection is in vaccinations. We know what that level looks like, and that has to be our target. And anything short of that means that we've got risk in our community. So whilst we have got our benchmarks and we're working towards targets, herd immunity is the ambition and it's where we need to get. And those are those are some of the conversations that are being had more broadly. One of the barriers we have, well, there's two barriers, there's consent, and the other barrier we have is opportunities to do pop-up vaccinations. But we've had really conversations over the past 2 or 3 weeks around where we can access local community assets free of charge to enhance our protection in local communities. And we've now got the mobile van as well, so we can do pop-ups more purposefully. So that's helping drive it up. But there is a whole cultural shift that's got to happen around vaccinations. And that's not only from a staff perspective, but also working with our communities in terms of understanding their barriers, which some of the work we did on the Great Vaccination Debate last year has achieved. But we've got a long way to go. I'm far from happy.
Okay, thanks. Welcome back in, Hannah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, okay, I was checking again in the same vein as that doesn't mean it's necessarily a good thing, but to Phil's question about cancer. So we ended at 63.1%. The All Wales position was 60%, and the range was between 54 and 65. So we're not doing very well in Wales. That's the outcome. So it's again, it's interesting, but we want to be aspiring to be much better than the Welsh. Well, we are better than the Welsh position, but even better, but in line with standard and in best in class from elsewhere. So just wanted to come back.
We've got Vivek online, you've joined us.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm in the Grange. Just a couple of points. First of all, in response to Phil's comment about, these patients with cancer who sometimes delay things, there is a lot of issues, we don't realize at the personal level. There are challenges where people don't have access sometimes to transport or having somebody to look after them, and that creates huge challenges. And it is not uncommon for people to delay tests because of that, or their son or daughter are away and they're waiting for their child to come and then they'll organize tests. And in the worst case scenario, you have one spouse being unwell and as a result can't take over because they're looking after their, the other spouse. So there are lots of little things which delay matters sometimes. But I was surprised with Leanne's comment about the waiting times. I was under the impression that once a patient is offered an appointment and is unable to take it for whatever reason, they come off the tracker or this pathway, and at least as much as I know, in England that is the case. Is it a separate way of measuring things in Wales? Thank you.
Yes, Vivek, it is. It's one of the conversations we've actually had with Welsh Government and NHS P&I counterparts, because obviously the target is also different in England as well. But it does take that allowance in to adjust the pathway on the basis of patient choice or delays. I think there's been a pretty firm view in Wales around not disadvantaging patients, but that does then impact on obviously what our performance looks like.
Thanks. Helen?
Just going back to Will's bit about the always average, because I think it's a really important one. And on the vaccinations, I'm glad you said it, Tracy, about going into local assets and working with populations, because averages have their uses, but they can also mask things, can't they? So we could be meeting an average, but actually going back to the fact that our population is so diverse within the Gwent area, we could be doing really well in one part of it and actually have massive challenges in the other. So I take some assurance from what you said, but I think it highlights really, doesn't it, that averages can only take us so far and they are useful, but there's a wider conversation to be had.
Any next, please?
Yeah, I just want to follow on from the vaccination and ask a quick question. The school programme, has it improved in the light of the recent meningitis outbreaks? There's a concern, and you were trying to think of ways of getting into school, and did we actually talk about it, or did I dream this? That it was consent unless there was no consent given. Yeah, rather than the other way around. So,
presumed consent.
Yes, presumed consent.
So there's so huge amount of work's going on in this space around consent agenda. What we found when we did the debate last year was one of the barriers was that parents assumed their children had consent, and
thought that the children were receiving vaccinations when they weren't, because consent hadn't been given. So that work continues. There's still a long way to go, and I'll keep you updated on that work. But we are doing more targeted work with schools because of what we found last year. So that is continuing. But again, there are certain capacity barriers to that, the way parents would want their children to have vaccinations and how we mobilise that differently. So we're taking everything we learned last year and putting it into practice. And I would hope that over the course of the next school year, we'll start to see that shift. In terms of meningitis, we'll know from the issue in Kent, there's also been a death in Reading more recently with 2 cases as well, again, meningitis B. And we know that for a certain cohort, so up to the age of 13, we know that those are the teenagers of the babies that received meningitis B, but there is a cohort of children that weren't given it as babies that will be going into university. So there is something about that protection around meningitis B. I mean, it will be a JCVI decision in terms of whether the vaccination regime is changed, but again, very close to those conversations. So if that shift happens, we'll obviously make sure that's implemented quickly. At the moment, meningitis, that age group is only available privately. And it's a cost of anything between £110 and £130 per dose, and you need 2 doses. So in terms of health and equality, it's significant.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Thank you.
Okay. Anna, any further on your report?
Yeah, thank you.
If members are happy to support and take assurance on the report as is, I'm going to call a short 15-minute break now before we go to the next item, possibly. I'll bring you then after the break, possibly.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. stream back up then. Thanks everybody. More on the second part of the report, bringing in Sarah, please.
Thank you. So moving on to the workforce performance. The staffing post section, the red lines throughout the report indicate the plan as per our previous annual plans for 25-26. You see staffing posts have remained pretty consistent, or slightly above our annual plan trajectory, with some changes associated over the last 3 months with fluctuations in turnover and recruiting to vacancies. The administration and clerical workforce profile is also shown in detail. A small increase over the last period, and this is a particular area of focus through our value and sustainability workforce work stream, and we've refreshed an admin and clerical review. It was undertaken in 2003 more recently, and will be working to identify opportunities to provide efficiencies through that work stream, as well as others moving forward. Sickness absence we touched on already this morning. You see that sickness absence has slightly decreased over the last 3 months. There would be fluctuations associated with seasonal trends through the winter period, where we see higher periods of absence, particularly during December, January and March, and then falling through to the end of March in a more declined way. They're pleased to say that that decline has continued through into April, with a particular focus on supporting services to reduce sickness absence, particularly through the lens of reasons for stress, anxiety and depression. And we've been pretty consistent in holding a very slight decrease for that reason for about 1.5% over recent months. And there's a programme of work supported by workforce and OD teams, focusing on identifying our data, providing training support and reviewing policy compliance, and also supporting our high areas of sickness absence with deep dives, supporting them with ways to improve well-being and support attendance at work, and also a number of support clinics available to identify resolutions for particularly complex issues. In terms of our bank and agency use, you'll see there that it's remained pretty consistent for bank. Our agency has fluctuated, more demand for agency and bank over the winter period, and again that will continue to be a particular focus of our workforce work stream and advancing sustainability. Slight increase in turnover over recent months, mainly with seasonal retirements, etc. But we'll be keeping an eye on that through our retention programme, and supporting increases in our performance appraisal, our PADR process. Positively, we usually see a dip over this quarter for PADR compliance, work that the teams have been doing to support maintaining that compliance has meant we haven't seen that over this last period, and I look forward to improve that compliance moving forward. Increasing our job planning compliance continues to be challenging. Helpfully, CIMA has her first chaired her first meeting at the end of April, was it?
Medical and dental workforce assurance group,
Yeah, and so we have put in place a strong governance kind of process where job planning compliance will be considered. There was healthy debate and discussion at that meeting, and we focus on key actions to support increasing compliance, especially noting that our doctors will have job plans in place, and many of those job plans have started being put onto our planning system, and is enabling those progression through to final sign-off. Mandatory and statutory training has remained consistent, and positively we maintain our time to hire well below the All Wales target. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Susan. Can I just ask one question? You mentioned about staff turnover. I think it's back to a point I think it was Ewan said earlier around being 1% over our staffing figure. I think I discussed this briefly on our one-to-one around the gatekeeping of when posts become vacant and about the system. It's important not to slow down in terms, especially in some of those key areas where we would be desperate to recruit them. But just ask around, have some assurance about how the gatekeeping works. So we don't simply have a post becomes vacant, we automatically fill it on every post. How do we make sure that we were able to slim down the head count that is being done, but it's not at the detriment of those posts that really need to be filled as quickly as possible?
So previously we had a vacancy scrutiny panel in place where certain vacancies would be considered on corporate level. Very small amounts of vacancies were declined through that process. So we took a decision to stand that corporate level down. But that's with assurance that all divisions will be undertaking the vacancy scrutiny process as they become available. Now got in place consideration to stand that back up and developed an options appraisal to be considered with a view to standing that up, to have that gatekeeping with more support and advice through to in the form of a checklist for divisions potentially to go through in terms of making those decisions, but also keeping the balance between making sure that we don't unnecessarily hold up key clinical front-facing roles. We've also got in place approval process for medical consultant roles, which has to be approved by CIMA. And in addition to that, whilst we stood down that vacancy scrutiny panel, we did tighten up our standard operating processes with around vacancies that were potentially being put onto our vacancy system without an identified budget. So whilst it may sound that we've had a gap in that vacancy scrutiny process, we filled that with a standard operating procedure in terms of any areas that might have been going on to our vacancy system without an identified budget.
Just ask one more. Perhaps it's just through a lack of knowledge being new into the organisation. So if this has been devolved largely down to the divisions, where is the assurance or scrutiny from the exec level to make sure that those divisions are challenging and pushing back appropriately? So is there a reporting mechanism up to the corporate level?
Yeah, Leanne might want to come in because there's divisional assurance meetings monthly that Leanne would hold. And I think one of the reflections of the previous vacancy scrutiny panel is we'd got to a point where there was little impact happening at that scrutiny level. So it was taking a lot of resource with little impact because we had confidence that the scrutinies that happens at the and when we talk about the division, so for example, there's the team on the ground, they'll need to get to the directorate team and get approval, then the directorate have to take it to the divisional team. So there's about 3 steps from the team on the ground needing to get approval. We would then introduce the 4th step, for example. But I think given our current financial position, I think that's why we kind of said we need to take stock and revisit it to see, you know, how much assurance are we, you know, how do we get that further assurance from the divisional system working through the checklist, but then what roles do we think should still come to an executive level? But as we said, Leanne then on a monthly basis would meet with divisions around the workforce and financial issues.
Except that it does need to be a balance as well, that otherwise it becomes overly intensive. But just wondered what the process is about using that pushback and challenge.
And as part of the options appraisal, which we've undertaken, we did see a reduction in the number of vacancies going through the system when we had the vacancy scrutiny panel. But as part of that process and put it in the other measures, so such as the standard operating procedure and assurance that divisions are undertaking their own local level scrutiny panels, we haven't over the last year or so seen that change. So we haven't seen a sudden increase in the number of vacancies going out. So if the workforce position is very complex, it's driven by transfers in, transfers out, some operating pressures as well as vacancies. But to support that position in the background, my team and Rob's team have been undertaking work on establishment controls as well, which we've almost finalised. So that will support any ongoing decisions around recruiting the vacancies.
Thanks. I'll go to Vivek first.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Sarah, for that report. I just wanted to ask, about the people leaving the organization, that are we doing exit interviews for these colleagues who are leaving the organization? And if we have, do we have any feedback from those interviews about the reasons for leaving? Thank you.
I think it's an area where we need to do more work with exit interviews are offered as a matter of routine, but they're not necessarily always taken up. And therefore some of the information that we have from them isn't particularly reliable. But it's an area of work that we certainly need to do more understanding and understand why people are leaving, but also to make sure that people are more engaged with the exit interview process.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. You want, please?
Yeah, like my usual group. So, but that impact, the fact that we had those boards in place did have an impact in it, because our, for example, admin staff came down from 2,850 down to 2,700. And now was crept back up again to roughly the same level.
It did have an impact, but during that period as well, we also saw a number of transfers out, which impacted a decrease in our admin staffing profile. So it wasn't only, that decrease wasn't only impacted by the vacancy treatment panel, but it certainly had an impact.
My actual question was going to be, obviously in the staffing post on the other, it's the very last point in there is that we're going to reset our performance targets or the graphs targets. Is that just going to be reset to the level we're at now, which we've done in the past? Because last year, if you look at where we were to, it just got moved to the starting point. Or do we know exactly what we want our staffing level to be for this year going forward?
So the staffing level for the year going forward will, at this moment in time, be that we've outlined in our annual plan, and then we would do
where we are today,
plans.
Or what is that staff number that's in the plan? I don't know off the top of my head what the staffing number is, because we've got whatever it is, 13,700 and whatever it is. Is that the staffing number that we need, or is that? Because this is on this graph, it's the number of people we employ, not the number of people we need, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that
It's the people we need, higher or lower
the
than that?
people that we need to deliver the services will have been modelled through the annual plan, which we previously agreed.
Which
so that
is,
people will go into the trajectory.
do we know off the top of our head? I don't think I've seen that number.
There's fluctuations in there. There's a small amount of investment, and there's also a whole-time equivalent reduction of around 60 whole-time equivalents. But there's various programs to work through. There's also more work to do within that staffing profile and what we need and what we don't need. So some of that will come through some of the work that we're looking at in terms of the admin review, where are opportunities to decrease that. But at the same time, there may be service requirements that change over the period of time. Over 12 months. If there's a service change that, or there's an investment that's made, that might fluctuate. But the trajectory that you'll see in the next report will more than likely be that exactly what we've agreed in the annual plan.
Okay, so when we come to that annual plan, then that first figure I see for April will be what's in that plan. So
Yeah.
do you remember off the top of your head what the
I
actual
don't remember
figure?
off the top of my head.
Just check. Anything did you indicate? Sorry. No. Okay. Rob.
Yeah, so there's been an awful lot of work on our workforce over the last few years. We've taken quite a significant amount of money out of variable pay, quite a significant, tens of millions. So that's been very successful. We're in a place now that, and this is nationally recognised, all health boards since COVID have had a significant increase in workforce, particularly admin workforce and some other blips elsewhere. So part of our work going forward is to look at our overall workforce plan, as Sarah's just described. A lot of the Value and Sustainability Board focus will recognise that our workforce is an area that does need significant review. Again, continuing the variable pay piece. We've already talked about sickness and the advantages of improving sickness. We've got quite a lot of financial drivers that are various elements that end up in a variable pay solution being incurred. So whilst we've got a really good grip on our substantive posts, as Sarah's described through, we call it the track system and matching with budgets and things like that. So that is very rigorous and complies with all our governance. There's more to do with around how easy it is to secure variable pay solutions, because that is, a lot of them are urgent, so you don't get that sort of degree of grip of control. Having said that, as I say, nationally, there is a recognition that a lot of our staff base has increased over the last few years, and in AB is probably about 1,500-1,600 staff members. So there's a step change that has happened since COVID. The Welsh Government are quite rightly asking, you know, what is that delivering? So that's something we're looking at, but there will be pressures on budget holders to live within their budgets this year, which may mean resetting workforce and staffing levels, which may have an impact then in terms of our financial bottom line. And we can't skirt away from that. That will be an area we will need to look at.
Thanks. Is there any other comments on what Sarah's presented to us?
I think, sorry, I just want to mention that sometimes with the GP contract, for example, sometimes we then get additional staff coming into the system to add on to it. So although that we may have a limited, a particular number, maybe 14,000, suddenly if we take back some GP surgeries, then those staff come in on top. So that just for information, really.
Good point. So Phil.
I just wonder whether the increase or the decrease in agency staff, of course, means that your bottom line numbers of staff employed will be up anyway.
Absolutely.
I remember that this board was dominated by discussions about how do we deal with agency staff. And actually, I think we've done a really tremendous job in switching from agency now to substantive staff. But what goes with that is your bottom line will be bigger. And maybe the sickness will be inflated slightly because, of course, agency staff wouldn't claim sickness pay, although the other side of the monetary argument there is they were paid incredibly lots of pay. So I guess all of this balances out somewhere. But I guess in terms of the added value and the quality of the service, part of the reason why the service is much better, I guess, is because we've got more substantive staff.
The biggest growth area in staffing, you know, aside from the issues with admin, have been nursing and midwifery, where we've had a focused effort on reducing agency and building sustainable established teams, because we know that's better for staff and patient experience, and in medical and dental, so where we've reduced our vacancies by 50% through the programme of work. It's had an impact on reduction in agency, reducing those costs, increasing our staffing posts, but there's still more work to do, and there's still more work we continue to do to improve that position as well.
Just on that, I suppose it's also important to say or to pull out what is the base establishment of the staff, because the post, in fact, an agency member, unless this occurs a specific request for additionality, an agency person coming in to fill a vacancy on a temporary basis, or because somebody is off or whatever it is, that shouldn't change the overall headcount, should it?
No, it won't.
Because it's the base establishment of the number of staff within the organisation. It's only that additionality with the agency. So it'd be interesting to know in terms of, say, as part of that turnover, what actual proportion of the turnover is being stripped out where it's possible. So
our numbers won't include agency or temporary staffing or those measures. So it'll just be on staff employed.
Just I think on that, I think, you know, in simple terms, our establishment should be staffing posts plus vacancies. And then what staff you're using in total, which will be over and above that because of some of our absence issues like sickness and extra capacity that we've opened up of our, so, you know, so we've got that. It's just probably a way of perhaps thinking about how we present the data. You know, there's definitely a change in the language nationally around head count and how that's shifting on the back of the work they've done about what's happened over the last 4 to 5 years. So I think that's something we've been picking up in the workforce group, is how we present some of this data now in that kind of context, because it's all there. And as we've said, that drive to fill vacancies has resulted in more staffing posts, which is a good news story, because our variable pay has come down significantly as well, particularly in agency. But trying to keep that triangulation of it all and what it's saying is, you know, probably something we can, but again, it's not that simple because there'll be different rates of pay. But I think a presentation in the way that the questions are asked is something we could kind of look at.
Because just trying to get my head around, because it's the funded posts within the establishment should be the, you know, the bottom line driver for the budget.
Yeah.
And then it's a separate question about how many of those posts are actually filled with substantive employees and how many are filled potentially with temporary. But the bottom line in terms of what is the substantive number in the organisation which is actually funded as part of the budget?
And I think that's been a very difficult question to answer for a long period of time, but the work that I mentioned on establishment controls will give us more intelligence behind that, so we're able to have that baseline data. And as I said, that's almost concluded. There's some difficulties around capturing some of the information that will help us, and we'll need that information to make sure that we in the future years we've got a new workforce system coming into place nationally, and we need to bottom up that information, and that will go into our system, which we haven't had in the past, and that will give us much more of a firmer view on that. What is the number? Whilst we have a firmer relationship between the workforce numbers and our financial position.
We don't come back in after all.
Yeah, and you know, exactly what we're saying there, getting to that, how many people do we actually need to run this service? Is it, you know, is the number we've been trying to get to for a little while now, I guess, of understanding.
Will provide more clarity around that number.
Yeah, because what we see is, you know, some of these reports tend to suggest there's a little bit of a creep in numbers going up or numbers coming down, but it's within the context of how many people do we actually need to run the service. And that's the piece I'm trying to get, is the clarity of, right, this is the number we want, and therefore we're below it, yeah, because we haven't got the staff numbers we need to run it, and they are on agency or bank or whatever it is. Or are we actually up there with everybody and somebody is employing people that they're not authorized, you know, and they need to be told stop doing it, kind of thing. And we haven't got, obviously, because of the size of the organisation, the control over who is employed where doesn't necessarily sit here. It's down in the division somewhere. And some of that, I believe, can be hidden, not hidden, intentionally, you know what I mean? There's a slight fog between us and where people are employed, I think.
In Robin is last one.
Yeah, so in the financial report appendices, page 4, there's some graphs in there that describe enhanced care, sickness and vacancy cover, where variable pay has been requested as a result of vacancies, which would answer your question. I think there's a wider piece here. So we've got a financial plan for 26-27. There's a significant deficit. So that means we have to reset budgets for everything, including workforce. So we've got to be careful that even though we've got a robust tracks governance process with budget has to be identified before approval is accrued. Going through 26-27 now, that budget is likely to have to be changed. Otherwise, we will end up probably worse than we're forecasting. I'm not going to go into detail now because that has to be a delegated decision really in terms of people that are delivering services and taking that view to try and best live within their budgets. But we do have to be careful that our control system doesn't actually facilitate overspending against our overall position. But having said that, in simple terms, our budget delegations to budget holders require them to live within their means. That will include staff and non-pay. So there's a more basic fundamental control here that needs to be managed within. accepting reality in some circumstances, because as an organisation we recognise there are potential cost pressures beyond our funding, but that decision may need to go up the line around where safety can't come into it. Safety has to be an overriding must do. But there are choices. We talked about digital priorities earlier. Prioritisation is at all levels now to try and get us where we need.
Thanks.
Just briefly on that, I think there is a very robust control system for appointed staff. So every post that becomes vacant has to go on a track system. It needs sign off by the budget holder, needs to endorsement by the finance business partner, and then if they're out with that, then it gets escalated up, sometimes ended up on my desk to say, this is outside of the budget, this is the rationale, can we approve this? So it's just reassuring that those controls do operate through our financial control procedures right the way up. So I think it's just important to give that reassurance.
Okay, thanks for a good discussion. I don't want the Jen, the next part of the report.
Yes, thank you. So this is the quality patient safety report. Just a reminder that clearly we have a quality management system. That quality management system enables us to focus on the quality assurance, but also the quality improvement and planning processes we have. We have 6 national standards for quality. We have 6 enablers, and within the health board to ensure that our reporting we're able to make sense of our quality metrics. We have 6 pillars. So patient experience, patient safety, clinical effectiveness, health safety and compliance, infection prevention, control and safeguarding. There will be other elements of quality that sit slightly outside of those, but in general, most of our quality reporting is managed in that QMS under those pillars. So just some highlights, and I'll take most of the report as read. On the first pillar, patient experience, we continue to see a really positive reporting around the experience of our service users. Our benchmark for Civica, which is our patient experience survey system, is around 86 to 88%, whilst it's a small percentage, around 2,700 people responding. Nonetheless, it gives us a really good benchmark. The national requirement is 85%, so we are consistently above that. And I'm really pleased to say, just referencing back to obviously our ED and our UEC pathway, our ED currently has a response rate of 81%. So really good in terms of experience, and that's improved over the last few months from around 75%. So we're seeing improved experience within our ED in particular. So that's incredibly pleasing to see. Our overarching themes in patient experience are waiting and communication, closely followed in our complaint process by clinical care and treatment. And obviously we have programmes of quality improvement work which focus with the divisions on those themes and areas. Our PALS service, which Paul obviously met in a lift this week, continues to see around 500 to 600 patients per month or their families, and PALS will try to de-escalate issues and deal with and respond to issues in the moment. That saves clinical time because they're able to take those experiences and to manage them themselves, but also it provides us an opportunity to do that sort of early resolution with families. We've done a lot of work on collaboratives, so we have big conversation events under a number of different themes with members of the public, so that involves the wider public, our patients and staff, and we've focused in a number of areas including sepsis and bereavement. And I'm pleased to say that we have a process of patient participation panels. So where we have a predominant theme, we then work with a group of service users or their families to try and understand their experience and understand how we work differently with that group. We've had some real success with people who are neurodiverse, who've particularly accessed our urgent care system, but also we currently have a number of pieces of work with the deaf community who've raised concerns about their experience, and Lisa will be aware of that. And we have our first participation panel in August. I have to say it's August because the community have requested that. We haven't delayed it. We wanted to do it sooner, but the community
requested August. So I think that's really positive. You'll see in the report that our putting things right performance did deteriorate. So you've got the January position because we obviously have 30 working days to complete. I'm pleased to say in April that's gone back up to 60.5%, and that will come through in the next report. From a patient safety perspective, we are, you will see our risk adjusted mortality index. That's obviously our benchmark position. This runs about 6 to 8 weeks behind because we code from the notes, and we are currently on the January data in the All Wales peer group. But the spike you'll see on the graph in January is normal variation according to winter infections and illness, etc. We also do a very detailed learning from death report, which is not mandated, but something we think is really important to ensure we're drawing the themes from people who've died following care in the health board, and that comes to patient quality safety outcomes committee. Just some areas where we've seen real improvement. So we've seen a real improvement in our rates of avoidable pressure ulcers in grades 1 and grade 2. So we've had a pressure ulcer collaborative, an improvement approach, which has been focusing on our grade 1 and grade 2 pressure ulcers. And you'll see we've got several points below the mean where we are seeing that sustained improvement. We've also seen improvement in our falls with an 8% decrease between January and February. And we've remained below the national average for falls for 10 months. So that's a really pleasing sustained position. I won't talk about ward accreditation because we've already talked about that, but obviously we're doing some work on the effectiveness pillar, and at the moment ward accreditation is what you have there around effectiveness measures. In terms of health, safety and compliance, we continue to see a favourable position in terms of our RIDDOR compliance, and continued work focuses on our manual handling training, but good compliance on other areas of mandatory training. From an infection prevention and control perspective, we are below the All Wales benchmark per 100,000 infections for all infections bar E. coli and Pseudomonas. We have specific work programmes that focus on those two areas. We form part of a national collaborative on C. difficile, so Clostridium difficile, and we've seen pleasing performance over the last few months in terms of the numbers of hospital-acquired infections. We have some further work to do on our Staph aureus infections, but nonetheless, pleasing position in terms of where we are with the All Wales benchmark. And then finally on safeguarding, our training compliance has really improved. Patient Quality Safety Outcomes Committee members will be aware that we've had some difficulty with our level 3 training. Level 3 training is for all clinicians, but that training requires an element of face-to-face. So it's more difficult to transact than level 1 and level 2. I'm pleased to say that despite not meeting the benchmark, we are seeing an upward trend in terms of access to the training and successful completion. So that's a really pleasing position to be in because we've done that with no additional resource. And I think, again, a really important in terms of our safeguarding competencies. And the final thing to say is that we've seen an increase in our calls to our internal safeguarding team around advice and support. I think that's a direct result of our improved visibility of the safeguarding team. They're very visible. They work with all of our operational teams and in terms of our training compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions, comments from us? Thank you. So we're just happy to note the 3 updates we've had. Everybody's content. Then we want to Rob, please, for the financial update period 12 months.
Exactly. Yes, this is a Health Board's Finance Performance Commission position, for the full year ending 31st of March 26. So I'll go through the various indicators that we're monitored against. So our revenue performance outturn position was a deficit of £18.3 million. That's what our plan at mid-year identified as a likely forecast, and that's where we have ended up. In the report, there's a table which maps how we've achieved that position, and the ins and outs, the positives and favourables impacts since mid-year. That's in the context of revenue funding we received in the year of £2 billion. So that deficit represents 0.9% of our turnover, just to give it that scale and clarity. As a result, we haven't achieved our financial target of financial balance. And in addition, our rolling 3-year aggregate basis of performance has not been achieved as well. That's running at £75 million cumulative deficit at this point in time, which is about 3.7% of our turnover. And whilst we have this rolling target, generally we are more held to account on the annual position. So again, just to give that sort of context. So what's driven the 18.3? Most notably, some unfunded national insurance changes, continuing healthcare placements, price driven that is, likewise drugs, particularly some of our acute drugs and haematology, and some significant pressures which we've already heard about today in urgent care ED, but also in terms of mental health, maintaining safe services there. And a positive decision by the Health Board during the year to make sure that our cancer performance for patients is maintained as far as we can possibly go. So those are the key areas. The report gives more detail in some of those. Our capital funding performance was an outturn of balance of £47,000 surplus, which is very positive. Our funding was £46 million. So again, that was a 3-year trend, and we have maintained our funding limits and the resource limits for that for 3 years with a cumulative surplus of £154,000. So again, positive for us. In terms of our revenue position, we did achieve savings of £43 million in year, so that's 2.2% on our total funding. However, the figure is bigger than that when you consider the level of discretionary funding we're able to apply savings to, so that's closer to 3%. And that's in comparison with £40 million, which is our plan at the start of the year. So whilst we did move from a planned balance to a deficit of 18.3, we did achieve significantly more savings of the order of £3 million. And obviously our savings approach is a continuous process as we go into the new financial year and the challenges that brings. In terms of public sector payment policy, where we have to pay non-NHS suppliers within 30 days, we've achieved 97% for the year. That's against a 95% target. And our cash holding at the end of the year was £5.5 million, which is within the £6 million guideline set by Welsh Government. So whilst recognising the revenue performance isn't where we would like it to have been, positive news on the other indicators that we have monitored against. In terms of moving and thinking about the new year, we've got significantly more savings challenges in the new year. It's part of the financial plan that's been approved by the board. Again, we're looking at significant savings ambition of £45 million, and progress of that and against that will be presented to the Finance Performance Committee and the board in regular reports. And just to conclude, the annual accounts for last year have been submitted to Welsh Government, sorry, not the Welsh Government, to Audit Wales on the 1st of May, presented to the Audit Committee, Audit Risk Committee yesterday, and the Audit Wales response on work so far has been quite positive, no significant issues identified. So hopefully that'll give us a clean opinion when they report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the table?
Yeah, I'm just going to back Rob up on that. The one thing I'd mention was obviously the accounts came to audit committee yesterday. The auditors quite complimentary about the work and what was going on and flowing through it. I guess the one thing, you know, in terms of the normal accounts, it'll be clean, I would imagine, from where we are, but we will obviously end up with an adverse opinion based on financial position.
Just going to pick up what Robbie said about the 26-27 plan, about the challenge around savings in there. Because although the plan was approved by board, it's unsupported by Welsh Government, which potentially means that when that does come back, the challenges around efficiencies and savings may be actually greater than as previously highlighted.
Yeah. So as part of the challenge back to us, one of the main areas for us to respond to is having an opportunities pipeline that can identify the potential to achieve financial balance potentially this year and into the future. So that's something that's work in progress currently, being considered by executive.
Well, I'm really sorry for this question, Rob. On page 4, you show the kind of movement between month 11 and 12 of variance against budget, and there's a very large movement in that kind of month, and I'm just a little bit surprised as to why it's moved. So the bottom line stayed the same, but at divisional level, been some quite significant movements.
So what we've done in month 12 is delegate some funding from reserves where we had funding confirmed from Welsh Government in March, which we wouldn't normally delegate figures from reserves if they anticipated. It's part of their sort of control mechanism to make sure that the divisional positions are supported by confirmed funding. So we had quite a lot of money, particularly for our waiting lists initiatives and the RTT work in the old financial year. It came through as confirmed figures in March.
So it wasn't a failure of forecasting, it was just money came in, that's fine.
Yeah, the bottom line will show the move, but the divisional level, it wouldn't be delegated formally yet.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no other questions then. We're happy to note and take issue on some of the reports. Very happy. We're on to item 6.1, which is matters from committees to the board. So I'll go through the committees and the chairs for updates. So first one, audit risk insurance committees, Ian, please.
I think to answer what's in the report, we had a meeting outside of the committee with the internal auditors yesterday. They're very happy with the work that the organisation is performing. They're very complimentary about Rani and her team, etc., about the work that they're doing. But obviously that's done with the support of all the exec here in looking at audit reports and clearing the audit actions, etc. Otherwise, nothing other than in the report, unless anybody has any.
Can I just note that, if that's okay, the committee yesterday considered the draft annual reports and accounts.
Oh, yeah.
They're waiting.
Yeah, that's not in this report, sorry, it'll be the next one. I was saving that for the next time, Rani.
Okay, move on to the next one, which is Charitable Funds Committee. Paul.
The information is contained within the documentation. Very happy to take any questions. I think that we're really grateful to all the members of the committee and to the staff that support the charitable funds. And I think we're doing more to promote the charity so that everyone, particularly members, the 14,000 staff are around that number, are aware of the charity, and that we should perhaps think about doing some charitable work and fundraising within the organisation. And 2 members of the charitable funds team did do a sponsored High Rocks, I think it's called, which was incredible to try and raise the profile of the charitable funds within the organisation, so we can use that to spend on patients and their sort of experience, and also staff as well. So there's lots of opportunities there. So if anybody wants to donate any money, or knows if anybody wants to donate any money, we've got our own charity. So please remember that. Thank you.
As I say, for the visits, myself and Will have carried out with Nicola. Nicola's highlighted some of the areas where some of the charitable funds have been put to good use, which is really positive, really good. Okay, and if there's any comments, we'll move on to the next one, which is patient quality, safety and outcomes committee. That's Helen.
Thanks. The report in here is just to meeting on the 6th of May, which is a very shortened agenda because we'd had to have a cancellation earlier in April, which Penny actually chaired as I was away. But I think it just took the opportunity to review two important areas. So the new Click analytics platform, which is to look at the data produced by the quality strategy and quality management team. And we already mentioned about the learning from death report, which is a very helpful and detailed report. I don't know whether Penny wants to add anything further, having chaired that meeting. So.
No, it's just quite a positive meeting. In fact, we felt it was quite a feel-good meeting. It's quite unusual.
Thank you. I'll obviously go away.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one then is the Mental Health and Learning Disabilities Committee, please.
Yes, this is ongoing. As you know, there have been concerns in that area, but the matters referred to the attention of the board, as you can see, including pressures and trends in section 136 detentions, the sustainability of dementia services in relation to current funding ending and where we go from there, mental health, digital maturity and the requirement for investment, and the impact of the Mental Health Act bill, which it will have considerable impact on the workforce. Workforce capacity challenges and future funding arrangements. So, but there were assurances, and the assurances including the Mental Health Act compliance. And we noted the improvements in training, documentation quality, and reductions in rectifiable errors, which were considerable. So alongside strengthened adult and monitoring arrangements, which was very positive. Likewise, the mental health and CAMHS performance received assurance on the sustained compliance despite increasing demand and system pressures. We all know about it, and we talked about the neurodiversity and psychotherapists issue. Dementia services, I've just mentioned, we need to understand the future funding, because of course it's on the increase and the population is getting older, and the quality and safety at Main Death Court, which was very positive, largely positive after a recent inspection. So they had to be, congratulated on that. There were some recommendations, but they have been not all to do with staff, but some to do with the estate, which won't surprise you, but they've been addressed. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. There's no questions on the next one, which is the People and Culture report, please.
I can't find my report, so on my papers. So
we'll come back to that in a moment.
Page reference there. Page reference. We got the answer. Can't see the report.
Yeah, it's one end.
Sorry?
I can't find my end. Yeah.
No, we've got. I don't think we had a Stuart meeting. We haven't had a meeting, so that's.
In 2 weeks' time.
It's very good reason.
Nothing to know, Paul.
We just need to know that. Okay, thank you, Paul. On to the next one, Partnership, Population Health and Planning Committee. Phil?
Sorry? No, nothing to add to what's on the board. Most of it comes with the board anyway.
Okay, thanks. And then the last one then, the Finance and Performance Committee, Neil.
Yeah, so our last meeting was 21st of April. But a number of obviously steps forward have been made and discussed on the agenda today, which are very, very material enhancements. Going back to the 1st of April meeting, I think we've been focused on 3 things at the Finance and Performance Committee: financial grip, operational delivery and patient outcomes, and also continuing to monitor performance across the many KPIs in this area, and challenging where progress has been too slow, and seeking evidence and assurances that improvements have been made. There is encouraging progress in several areas, and several of these we've talked about. Planned care is improving. Reductions in the longest waits, fewer missed appointments, mental health access remains strong. And urgent care performance has improved following the winter pressures, although there is still a lot to do. We've also looked at practical steps to improve delivery, but I would say that I think the changes that we've announced and discussed at board today around governance and the integration into Finance and Performance Committee of Urgent and Emergency Care actually makes a great deal of sense. It really does. And I think I wouldn't like to say that we've been running out of road, but I think, as Rob has pointed out, making £43.5 million savings over the last 12 months is very considerable. We've did a similar level of saving the previous year. And I think the big opportunities now are savings around where we can see structural, continuous opportunities through changes in performance and process. That's where our savings have to come from in future. And so what I'd like to conclude by saying really is I think the changes that we've announced at board today will hopefully set us well on course to realise those opportunities going forward. Questions?
Okay, thanks, Neil. There's no questions of anybody. Just happy to we all pretend to know the reports and the updates we've had from the board today. That's all agreed. We move on to 6.2 in terms of the Executive Committee Chair's report, which is Nicola's Chief Executive present.
Yeah, so I can pretty much take the report as read. You can see it's been a busy couple of months covering the various issues, particularly focus on quality and safety, around maternity and neonatal and mental health has been a key focus for us. And around, particularly on strategic planning, it's worth mentioning that Neville Hall Hospital's strategic outline case, we had a meeting with the Investment and Infrastructure Board at Welsh Government to report the kind of where we got kind of questions and asked about the case, and that is now with Welsh Government for a decision to enable us to receive approval to go to the next stage. So we're waiting now at this minute. But we'd obviously had that discussion with the executive team. Otherwise, I'll take any questions, Chair.
Any questions of anyone? Happy to note and agree. Okay, item 6.3 strategic risks report for May 2026. And this is again, Nicola, please.
Yes, so the strategic risk report is the standard report. There's no recommendations for any changes to the risk status following committee reviews. We continue to have 6 of the 21 risks outside of our risk appetite, which is set out there, and most of those are issues we're very aware of, many of which we've discussed today. And there's work underway for the next 3 to 6 months, particularly around strengthening the risk and assurance process, which Ryan will be leading. And you can see what kind of key issues, the key areas we'll focus on, again, to continue to strengthen that risk-based approach that we've got for the organisation. So just requested to kind of get the assurance around the strategic risk being properly identified and note the work that is ongoing.
Thanks. You went, please.
Sorry, Nicola. Reading through the risk report, I know there's a huge amount of work that goes into this, etc., but it's around the controls that we have in it, or the planned controls, and making those a little bit smarter in terms of specific and measurable, etc., etc.
Yeah, in terms of all of the risks.
Pretty much, to be honest with you. I read through the control piece, and I don't get them. I get some comfort that we're doing something, but it's getting that real comfort that the plans that we have in there will bring us back within our tolerance levels.
Yeah, and I think some of the focus areas in the next 2 months, particularly around that kind of evidence of the risk mitigation section in particular. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, just as I mentioned, this audit committee yesterday, we continue to work with Director Lees to review the risk profile, and Lucy is really good at challenging some of what's there. I think the internal audit report provides us with reasonable assurance, but one of the recommendations was around having greater reporting through executive committee, which we've now put in place as well. So I think there's greater opportunity for that review through that mechanism. And we've recently received a meeting, and we've talked about having a bit of a scheduled deep dive focus as a collective on the SRR as well. So I think putting those steps in place will help just that kind of refinement. And
Is that assurance that when you look at this, you know, that there are however 10, 20 actions in there that will bring us back in? If it doesn't bring us back within our risk, risk appetite, then what's the next step? What do we accept it as a board? We don't have to necessarily come back with intolerance, but we need that assurance then that, yeah, we're all comfortable with it, where we accept that risk then.
There is no way all of those risks will always be intolerant.
No, I'm not saying that we should have I'm not saying that we should have a plan to bring us back in. It's where do we think we'll end up, and therefore we have to accept that as a board then.
I always say this with every risk register. I'm a little bit surprised it's not a cybersecurity risk on the corporate risk register.
Yes, we're laughing because we've recently had an audit report that said the same.
Oh, okay.
So we've got two levels. This is our strategic risk register, which is about delivery of our longer term strategic objectives. We've got a developing corporate risk register that is much more about the day-to-day risks, which we will bring forward to the board at a point in time. It's just being refined, but it is on that risk register.
Yeah, so we've got a director of risk register which has got lots of cyber security risks on there. We have escalated specific risks to the corporate risk register around Windows 10, for example, but we've mitigated that. It's dropped off, but we haven't got that overarching one which we're working on.
We may need to talk about this. So, for example, cyber supply chain risks around cyber are where hospitals being hit all over the country. So
yeah,
I'm happy it's on a risk register somewhere. I guess I don't quite understand the difference between corporate and whatever. So we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to note that historically we've tended to keep track of that as part of one of the sub risks within, I think it's 06, which is where the digital and technology risks are. There's a specific one around failure of IT systems, and we've tended to include cyber as part of a failure mode, because it's just as likely. Obviously, cyber attacks are a risk to us, and particularly supply chain attacks, and they're likely to be just as disruptive as a failure of legacy technology. So we have until now use that one risk as a catch-all for all of it, but obviously we've had an audit report that says we should develop a separate one, pull that out separately. I'm not necessarily convinced that's the right thing to do, because I think failure and cyber are very closely linked, and very similar issues, but audit seems to want us to pull it out. So.
Any other questions? Okay, members happy to agree that and note the report in terms of assurance. Taking on board the points that also Randy said about the additional steps that's going to be taken. Okay, on to the next item 6.4, which is the report from FIS. Is it Lisa, please?
Hi, yes, thanks, Chair. I'll take the report as read, just some key highlights really I wanted to bring to your attention today. Firstly, just under complaints advocacy, I wanted to share the work that we've been doing with what was PTR, now LTP team within Aneurin Bevan. I have to say the team I know has had some capacity issues, but their commitment to ensuring that the new process is embedded and patients' experiences at the heart of that has been astounding really, and well appreciated by the FLICE team. We've been doing lots of work with them with regards to developing an early offer of advocacy support, which has been quite testing and is quite a challenge in the current circumstances, but it is moving forward with speed, which is great. And I guess you will note from the complaints advocacy data shared, we have had an increase around secondary care care during the March to April time period. But the implementation of LTP around resolving earliest point of contact is proving quite helpful. So I just wanted to set that really for context, 'cause it is quite a shift for health boards and wider partners to ensure that person-centred approach within a different time set restriction. What I would say is that Llais across the Welsh footprint have been advocating with the Welsh Government around some of the concerns of having had conversations later in the programme stage with primary care providers in particular. So I just wanted to share that with you to flag, and we're having those conversations locally as well. Just in terms of same-day urgent care, I won't linger, but obviously we've had a really good, robust conversation around that today, and I met with Leanne and Matt yesterday around the improvement plan. I'm really pleased to see that the team have included the people's principles that have been pulled together by Llais as a All Wales piece of work to embed into their programme of works and to receive their assurance in terms of delivering the plan and making it real, because it is quite ambitious, and ensuring that culture change is embedded also. So thank you for that conversation today. Just reaching out really, Paul, I know I've committed over the past few board meetings around Llais focus on young people. You'll note we've now launched our Crew Llais All Wales programme, which is very much focused on hearing the voice of children, young people, and feeding that through to ensure they are influencing change about what matters to them in terms of health and social care. And you'll note some key themes that I've shared with you. Particularly around mental health came through loud and clear with our young people. We engaged with just over 675 over the 8-week period that we are reporting, but also the wider concerns they have around financial and money pressures and how that impacts their health and care for family members. So we will be doing some more intensive work and developing a whole school approach to ensure that their voices are shaping health and social care services moving forward. I've also just put the links in for information. Happy to have a conversation outside the board with regards to the piece of work we did with carers, in particular reaching out to dementia, stroke and carers with long-term conditions. So some real nice bits of good practice that we've shone a light on within the report. Also areas for development and challenges that are ongoing, and we're continuing that conversation within the RPB space. And then just moving on, lastly, I know that Jenny referenced it earlier. We've been doing some really positive work with the participation, patient participation panel. Tanya Strange has been superb in terms of really giving heart and drive to ensuring we are taking a co-productive approach around the hard of hearing and deaf community and some of the challenges that have come to light, and quite significant changes as a result of hearing from that community. So very much thank you. It really does show a shift from moving listening to action for this particular piece of work. So just wanted to really say, you know, thank you for that, because it has been quite difficult. And I'm really happy to take any questions here and now, or if you'd like to contact me outside the meeting, I'm happy to do that also. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Paul, first, please.
Can I just say, first of all, to applaud the work on the young people. I noticed 675 young people being interviewed, etc., which I think is absolutely incredible, and well done for that. I suppose the only thing I'd say would be the so what question, because when I looked at it, I thought actually what the young person wants is some advice about how they can access it. I mean, for example, if you ring your GP, it's going to be, well, who are you, what do you want, what's the problem, etc. And that's not quite a conversation a young person wants when they ring up, you know, if they're on the bus going to school, to then have a conversation about, well, actually, hang on a second, I've got the entire bus listening to this conversation. So it's about really advice to the young person, and equally then perhaps looking at some advice to GP practices about, you know, if you've got a young person on the phone, how do you triage that? You know, what the sort of conversation you need to have on that, and whether there needs to be some training on that. And the other thing I was going to say, which for you to perhaps lobby about for Welsh Government, would be an app for young people and health. We've got the NHS Wales app coming online. I'm not sure to ask Paul earlier whether there's a young person's part to that, and if not, perhaps that's something we need to look at. And if you can mention that 16 and 17-year-olds are now voting, then it may be something we can engage on that particular area. But otherwise, I thought you were really good. But it's just the impact bit at the bottom about, right, you've told us this, and actually this is what practical stuff we're now going to do to, you know, to help out. But well done.
Thank you, Paul. And absolutely, you're absolutely right. So this initial kind of sharing with you has been our first 2-month launch of this particular way of working that I kind of alluded to in previous meetings. Really is now live, and it is about so what. So for us, this is about using this information. It's only step one. We're going to continue over the next 12 months to really reach out to our children, young people communities, so that we can then share that information with health and with social care to say, this is what young people are saying, what and how can we change as a result to improve services, and then feed it back to them. So this is about gaining insights and intelligence so changes can be made, and young people will be with us across that whole process, and then we can go back with those changes. Your point is absolutely noted about the digital platform, and we do have a session in the next couple of weeks with Welsh Government around the NHS app, so absolutely we'll pick that up. Thank you, as well noted.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. David?
Thanks, Lisa. I noted the contacts around GPs and concerns around missed and unsent referrals, and I sort of picked this up partly because anecdotally, within my own family, I've noticed 2 separate referrals that have been unsent into hospital. I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to gain some assurance that this is not a widespread practice across our GP system. Obviously, GPs are really busy, and it's very easy to accidentally miss something and not do it. But anecdotally, I've got a couple of examples, and you've obviously had some contacts similar, and these potentially have a big impact on patients, particularly where waiting lists are long. I know from a communication perspective, it's very difficult to determine whether or not you are on a waiting list. Hopefully NHS will make that a little bit better in places, but there's very little communication you get, and it could be 6, 9, 12 months before you get and realise that you've had no response to a referral, so it could have big impact on people. I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to try and gain some assurance that the lack of missed referrals is not a growing or big practice within our GP community.
And so just on the NHS Wales app, obviously the referral notifications is now live on the NHS Wales app, and Iron Bevan is the leading the way in Wales on the number of referral notifications that have been sent. I'll pick up with my team on the specific issue down to see if there's anything we need to look at.
As somebody else indicated, so if everybody's content, we note the report from police, and thank you again, Lisa, for presenting. Just on to the on item 7, in terms of just the consent agenda, just to re-emphasise to members, if there is nothing to be put forward from items 7.1 and 7.2, we assume that they are agreed and we note them. Be happy, content, yes. Okay. On to any other business. I'm not aware of any other urgent business. Just check in with Chief Executive. No. So that concludes the whole meeting, and we'll go to lunch now and come back at 2 p.m. So, thank you.